morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ms. Bloom, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham?
Here.
Board Member Flores?
Here.
Board Member Goff?
Here.
Board Member McClellan?
Here.
Board Member Rankin?
Here.
Board Member Sheppel?
Here.
Board Member Schroeder?
Here. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Board Member Goff, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Please.
I move to approve the agenda as published.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Great. Move on to the consent agenda. Board Member Rankin, would you be good enough to read the consent agenda for us?
I move to place the following matters on the consent agenda: 16.03-16.12. Approve the charter waiver request items 16.03 through 16.12, inclusive as set forth in the published agenda. 18.02 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license and an authorization charge number 2014 JMKB 1048. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the stipulation and final agency order concerning the credential holder's license and authorization. 18.04 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an application charge number 2015 JMM R606. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.05 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning applications charge number 2016 CPE S 815. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.06 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an authorization and application charge number 2017 JMJB 1077. Direct department staff and State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the credential holder's authorization, and direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign an order of application denial. 18.07 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an application charge number 2017 EYAH 1673. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.08 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an application charge number 2017 CPHS 781. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.09 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an application charge number 2017 CPKA 794. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.10 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an application charge number 2018 JMGB 254. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of application denial. 18.11 regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license charge number 2018 CPGA 891. Direct the chair of the State Board of Education to sign the order of summary suspension of the credential holder's license. 18.12 approve the 11 requests for an initial emergency authorization as set forth in the published agenda. 18.13 approve the 10 requests for emergency authorization renewals as set forth in the published agenda. 18.14 approve Denver College of Nursing's request for reauthorization of its traditional school nurse birth to 21 program. 19.02 approve the list of recommended guarantees for the 2018-2019 expelled and at-risk student services EARSS grants, as well as the recommended amounts of the grant awards. 20.01 appoint Patrick Mount, Samantha Gallagher, Mark Mayer, and Janice Cook as the replacements for vacancies on the Education Data Advisory Committee, EDAC. This is the end of the consent agenda.
Thank you. That's a proper motion. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Sheppel. Yes.
Excuse me, Chair.
Do you want to pull anything?
Yeah, I do.
Please.
There would be 1603, 1604, 1605, 1606, and 1607.
1603 through 1607, does that sound right?
Yes.
Thank you. All right,
Maybe 1608 as well.
maybe or yes?
Yes.
Is that 808?
Yes,
16.08. So I think it's 1603 through 1608.
That's correct.
Great. Anyone else want to pull anything? Board Member
Madam
Rankin.
Chair, I'd like to pull 19.02.
All right. Any others?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Board Member Durham.
I wrote it down wrong, naturally. Where are the, what's the number of the disciplinary actions again? 18?
They're 18, 1802, 1803 is not
Is a
pulled.
vote.
Is a vote. And then 1804, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, here it is. I think the one I want to pull is 18.10.
18.10.
No,
Charge number 254. 18.10.
18.10. Yeah, I wrote it down wrong. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Ms. Bloom, did you catch all those, please? Thank you. Do you want to call the roll? So this is the consent agenda,
Did you
less
have
all
one?
those items.
Wait a minute.
I'll wait.
Oh, sorry.
I'll wait till after the roll call.
Okay.
Board Member Durham?
Yes.
Board Member Flores?
Yes.
Board Member Goff?
Yes.
Board Member McClellan?
Yes.
Board Member Rankin?
Yes.
Board Member Shepherd?
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder?
Yes.
That passes on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Board Member Goff.
Yes, just a memory question. Did we not agree that if we wanted to pull items off the consent agenda, we were going to inform one another beforehand?
There was a discussion about that, and some of us did it and some of us didn't do it,
Yeah.
I guess is the answer, right? I believe you notified us that you were pulling 19.02.
I notified Melissa. I
And-
don't know if.
And
I
Melissa,
don't
did
know
you
if
share
we
that
need
with
to
all the
do
board
more
members?
than notify Melissa.
So my apologies, I did not share that yesterday, the item that Board Member Rankin was planning to pull with all
Okay.
board members. That was my fault,
Okay.
my apologies.
And I forgot about the quasi-room.
It's just a polite intent in order to give us a chance to go back and look at what the items are that you were concerned with. Board Member Durham.
Well, I think that's appropriate, presuming we have all materials far enough
Right.
in advance, and I don't know exactly by what mechanism everyone would be notified. I do think it's helpful if staff knows, because obviously they have to do additional preparation,
Right.
in which I did not do in this particular item, because I didn't catch it till yesterday. But I don't
Yeah.
think we should be detoured from removing items if at
That
any
was not
point-
the intent, that was not
Yeah,
the intent.
If at any point in time we believe that there's something troublesome
Right.
about the issue. So,
To the extent that we know in advance,
Right.
I think it's helpful, not only for staff, but also for us to go back and re-review the particular item
I agree.
that you have a concern with.
Madam Chair, can we recommend?
Ms.
that-
Goff, does
Oh,
that
I'm sorry.
answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, I just hope it becomes somewhat of a customary precedent, starting now.
So we're gonna put it at the end today, so that gives us some chance, if we have a chance, to go back and look at some of those. Board Member Rankin.
Madam Chair, I believe if we notify staff, they might put it all together and notify us all at once. I feel comfortable notifying one person, but then do I have to
No.
notify everybody else?
No, I
That-
think
Well, thank you.
we'll make staff
Do it.
collect that for us. All right, are we ready to get a report from the Office of State Board Relations? Are you ready, Ms. Bloom? And welcome. Welcome to the hot seat.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, Commissioner Antis. I'd like to give a friendly reminder to board members and presenters, and myself probably too, to please speak clearly into your microphones. Those of you needing to connect to CD's Guest Wireless, you can locate CD's hotspot. The password is silver with a capital S. In your board packets, you have the following: the quick glance expense report and an events calendar. I do want to draw your attention to an upcoming event, the NASB Annual Conference here in Denver, October 17th through 20th. Please remember to let Carol know if you would like to attend, and she will register you. In your board packets and available on board docs are the following materials for Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. For item 11.01, a calendar with the proposed State Board of Education meeting dates for 2019. For item 12.01, a memo concerning the preliminary 2018 school and district performance framework results and accompanying PowerPoint. For item 12.02, a memo concerning multi-district online schools and accompanying PowerPoint, multi-district online enrollments by district, a sample expenditure report, and performance data for multi-district online schools. For item 14.01, a memo concerning the Colorado awardees for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. For item 15.01, a memo concerning the administrative procedures for state board accountability actions, a red line and clean version of the administrative procedures, and a fact sheet on House Bill 181355. For item 16.01, a memo concerning an emergency rulemaking for 1 CCR 30195, rules for the administration of the School Transformation Grant Program, a red line and clean version of the rules, and a crosswalk of rule to statute. For item 16.02, a memo concerning the notice of rulemaking for 1 CCR 30195, rules for the administration of the School Transformation Grant Program, a red line and clean version of the rules, and a crosswalk of rule to statute. For items 16.03 through 16.12, memos and supporting materials for the charter school waiver requests. For item 17.01, a memo concerning dyslexia, a fact sheet on dyslexia, and the accompanying PowerPoint. For item 18.01, a memo concerning a notice of rulemaking for 1 CCR 301-101, rules for the administration of the Retaining Teachers Grant Program, a clean version of the rules, and a crosswalk of rule to statute. For item 18.12, a memo concerning requests for initial emergency authorizations. For item 18.13, a memo concerning requests for emergency authorization renewals. For item 18.14, a memo concerning reauthorization of the Denver College of Nursing's Educator Preparation Program. For item 19.01, a memo concerning a notice of rulemaking for 1 CCR 30168, rules for the administration of student possession and administration of asthma, allergy, and anaphylaxis management medications, a red line and clean version of the rules, and a crosswalk of rules to statute. For item 19.02, a memo concerning the recommended list of grantees for the expelled and at-risk student services grants and list of recommended awards. For item 20.01, a memo concerning appointments for the positions on the Education Data Advisory Committee, the 2017 EDAC membership, and the proposed 2018 EDAC membership. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions, folks? All right, our next item is our report from Commissioner Anthus, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Good to be here and see you all again. We had kind of a shorter month this month, Labor Day, and then I actually took a vacation. So I don't have nearly the report that I had last time with all of the external engagement, but we have been doing a lot of internal work this last month. As you have on your agenda today, released the school performance frameworks and district performance frameworks, the preliminary frameworks, and you'll get a report on that today, but that always takes a lot of internal staff work to get that out. We've also just launched the second year of our grant applications for our schools that are identified in need of improvement, which we affectionately call the EASY application process, where we've sort of combined all of the grant programs and we try to help broker some of those things to district needs. And so we're going to be doing a provider fair this year, which is where districts can make connections with us and with folks that are on your approved provider list and see where the good fits are. We also announced our Teacher of the Year finalists, and I want to thank Board Member Goff for participating in that process. There are six finalists from around Colorado, so we're really excited about all of those folks, and a press release went out about that probably a week or so ago. Then we did just receive in our assessment release and all of our data release, we did receive a lot of sort of kudos and appreciation from groups about the ability to release all that information, the timeliness of that information, and the amount of information that was released. So we were pleased that we could we could get that all out, and that takes a lot of work and effort from our team. So I just want to thank our staff on that one. We have been continuing to do just outreach to districts. You know, once the standards work has passed, just outreach on implementation, especially on the implementation of the science standards. And so we're gathering feedback on the materials and timelines and those sorts of things that districts feel would be necessary to appropriately implement the new standards. Lastly, just wanted to give an update on the Education Leadership Council. That work has been going on over the summer. And so what had really been going on over the summer is the original 25 members of the ELC had not been meeting over the summer, but the subcommittee work had been meeting over the summer. So there are 4 different subcommittee groups. We've had over 100 sort of content experts involved in those groups, lots of public participation in those groups, lots of round tables that the different ELC members have been conducting to get input into kind of that larger, you know, what can we all agree on in Colorado in terms of the pillars of what we want our education system to look like. And so the timeline for that is still meant to have a draft. We've been affectionately saying there will never be a final report because it will always be changing and adjusting and have different input into it, but wanting to have some sort of a blueprint or something to share with the legislature and the new governor. Well, I guess we wouldn't share, but yeah, well, yes, we would. The timing would work in December, mid-December. So that process is underway. We had over 5,000 folks respond to the survey that went out. We've had those roundtables. We've been kind of meeting with different folks from an advisory perspective. And many of the things you all have been talking about as a board have worked their way into that in terms of multiple pathways, thinking more intensely about apprenticeships, CTE pathways, a lot of different things that we're thinking of, not just the linear pathway of, you go to school, then you go to a 4-year college, but there's a lot of multiple pathways we can think about in education. So that work has been going on. I'll make sure we have been sending out the meetings. They haven't, like I said, the ELC has not been meeting over the summer, so we'll probably get those meetings back on the schedule and make sure that you have those. And then lastly, was just going to share, a few pictures since I regaled you with the big event that I was doing. Just going to share 3 pictures with you all, just so you know I actually did it. I actually completed the race. I went to Oregon. It's sort of hard to see, but can you put that up on the full screen? Ah, there we go.
How many per team?
There's 12 people per team, so that first picture is our full 12-person team at the base of Mount Hood. So we're all in shorts, but it was very cold. And then the bottom right, or the bottom, right corner is my van. So the team is split into 2 vans, and that's my van. And then this is just to prove that I ran. That's me. That's me coming up to our one of our exchanges. This was one of the only legs I did in the sunlight. So I decided to give you that picture. And this is the finish line. So you see, I had mentioned that one of the reasons we wanted to do this is the first time we did it 4 years ago, it was essentially hurricane force winds at the beach. And so everything was torn down. So we were like, we at least need the beach party. But as you can see, it's sort of cloudy and rainy even now. But we were there, we got to finish on the beach. And so just thought I would share that with you because I appreciated your support in letting me go. So no injuries, nothing like that. So
Just in the dark.
Just in the dark, yes.
You sure that isn't the airport, our airport?
Not quite.
I'm just kidding.
But thank you for indulging me, and with that, I'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Questions, colleagues? So I have a question. I think there's been some interest expressed in understanding the process for our approved provider list. So I know that the list is on the website, but whose approval, please?
I believe
And
it's
what-
your approval for certain turnaround grants and providers, but Ms. Pearson, do you?
Do you mean
The providers.
the providers for turn support? So
Mhm.
we did not approve anybody. We don't have a, like, this is the only people you can use. We asked for, we did an RFI and asked for submissions from anybody who is working in management or turnaround leadership or charter management operators. And they sent in, and we kind of evaluated and provide some feedback on the organizations that were submitted, but they're not, if you're not on the list, you can't use them. It's just, we're trying to vet and collect who might be available and interested in working in different parts of the state. We collected what parts of the state and what school districts the providers were available to work into, so that different districts could go in and see, okay, this is somebody that would be willing to come to our part of the state. So they're gonna come to the first provider fairs Monday, and then we have another one in October, so people can just get a chance to meet each other and just have everybody in one place, so that districts don't have to start calling around and trying to figure things out on their own. Again, they are not limited to the people on that list at all.
Right.
It's just
What
a
I'm what I'm
resource.
curious about is the approval, if there's actually approval.
There's not a stamp of approval of, like, we're going to guarantee this person or this organization is going to be able to make this impact for you. It's just that this organization meets the criteria we put forward
Which
and put
is?
out there. I can get you all
Yeah,
the
that would
details
be-
of
that
that,
would be
sure.
helpful. What is the
Absolutely.
criteria that
That we
that's
use
been
to look
set?
at them.
Mhm.
Yep. I will get that for you. We can bring it down before the end of the day.
That'd be great. Board Member Flores, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Are there ex-superintendents and principals and people such as that have applied?
As
It's on
in,
the website.
yeah, we can send you out as individuals. I don't think we got very many individuals that applied for it. And again, we can do this in the future and expand. So it's more organizations that have come together and put their names in the list. But again, that doesn't mean that a superintendent, a former superintendent or principal couldn't be a consultant.
Yeah, that's-
I talked to a
that's
district the other day, and they've used a former superintendent that helped them with some of their board work.
Right.
So there's a lot of flexibility there for them.
Was that in the report stating, in the information that went out to the public?
That it could be an individual, I'll
Right.
double check on that for you.
Right, because I think that's very important, because we do want someone
Yep,
who has had that background
yeah,
and experience.
absolutely. I'll get all that stuff for you before the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, board reports. Board Member Durham, let's start with you.
Before or after I sneeze?
Your pick.
Thank you. I think most of my activities this past month, I think I visited Denver 3 times to meet with department staff, and they were all very helpful meetings. One of them was attended by a constituent of mine who's been very interested in vocational education and has been trying to work with the department to move or enhance the opportunities for vocational education, particularly in rural areas. And staff has been very helpful in trying to move that process along, although it is a very difficult process. And then I did send out to everyone a copy of an editorial that appeared in my local paper, which was a reprint from the Oklahoman newspaper about the percentage of students who graduate, at which point they drop out, and I wasn't sure that the data would be exactly correct, but then this publication, which is was on all of you received today, when you got here, I took a look at it yesterday, and the little breakout sheet is remarkably similar to those numbers, which would indicate that I do think we need to take a harder look at vocational education, and this is presuming the accuracy of this, and I would ask Dr. Anthus to take a look and see if these numbers are generally correct. Then I think we need a much broader conversation with the business community and other interested parties about the direction perhaps we need to try and move education in Colorado. Thank you.
There has been, I guess in the radio press, there have been some articles, and it suggests that Colorado actually is further along in this area than other states, but that does not suggest that we've got it. And again, it tends to go district by district, which is one of our challenges. Board Member Goff?
I would offer that from what, over the past couple of years particularly, the work of the CareerWise groups and Colorado's, through the community college system, the whole CTE strand discussion has been going on for quite a long time. And yeah, we are ahead of a lot of places in the fact that we've been able to implement concurrent enrollment and the early college phenomena like we have. And I think it's always a good conversation to be having. At the same time, good idea to keep up with what is already going on here.
Do we have a synopsis of where we are in Colorado, career-wise, and some of the other organizations? I mean, we know, I think we find out from some of our districts. You know, I look at P-TECH in St. Vrain and other places, but I don't know whether there's sort of a warehouse that collects that information so that we can see where are the gaps.
Yeah, we can.
Where the successes.
We can certainly provide an update on that. I think one of the things we talked about is using our strategic plan to kind of provide you guys updates on the different initiatives. And one of those core elements of our strategic plan is multiple pathways, which means, you know, more career tech ed, more vocational, more, you know, early college, more concurrent enrollment, all of those different ways that students get educated. And so we do have some numbers on that, and we can do a separate presentation on all of that for you, because we have been working pretty tightly with CareerWise.
Board Member McClellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, I've taken the time to tour some of the trades, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, and the laborers, and most of them have apprenticeship programs, some of which even pay and help with placement. And the laborers in particular are focused on a wide variety of skills that general contractors rely on. So I think we should look at ways of encouraging cooperation with the trades, because that can be a wonderful way for people entering those skilled workforce jobs to do so without debt.
So one of the things I think we need to figure out is what's the state role in that, what's the district role? Because generally we tend to see districts working with their manufacturers, their folks. What's an appropriate role that we can play in order to help, such as CareerWise, et cetera? Board Member Flores.
Well, there's a couple of centers in the country. One of them is the one in Georgetown, which deals with policy, and they have a policy center. And especially that report that came out and they on Colorado, and it's called the Rocky Mountain Divide. It's called the Center for Education and the Workplace. That's one. Another one is the Center for American Progress, which has put out a report on curriculum reform in the nation's largest school district. It's a really incredible report in the area of curricula, and especially dealing with the largest school districts. And those are some of the areas. I know rural school districts have issues, but you know, magnify that by several tens of, well, they're larger. They have more complex. They're more complex, and more issues. I have been, of course I always read. I've been reading a lot of these reports. I've also have been meeting with people here in the department, and one of the, I guess, the largest portion of my time has been taken up with meeting with people in my district, especially in Denver, given that we are looking for a new superintendent, and the timeline, I've been called by several people and wanting to extend the timeline and recommending people, but you know, I'm not part of the selecting committee, so it's kind of futile on that end, but that has taken up a lot of my time, and people are really, really kind of focusing in and getting involved, and I think I do have a list of the timelines and where these meetings will take place, so I share those. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board Member Rankin, are you ready? Please.
On August 17th, I visited Pueblo and met with the leadership at Goal Academy. And if you went through our multi-district online
It's a biggie.
today, that they have almost 4,000 students there. Their new superintendent is Constance Jones, and she has some interesting challenges ahead, but her strength and leadership is evident in a very talented staff. The biggest challenge that they have right now is bandwidth in some of the more remote areas of Colorado, and I know that a lot of our districts have problems with that, but it was very enlightening to see that staff being so motivated for this upcoming year. September 7th, I met in Grand Junction with Mesa 51's new assistant superintendent, Scott Cooper, and the district, as you may know, is interviewing candidates for interim superintendent, as Superintendent Ken Huptenstall resigned in August. I was in Grand Junction last week and visited the Goal Academy there, and the place was packed with students. And I thought that was unusual because I've been there before where there's maybe just 3 or 4, but they said that their enrollment is growing, and they are really excited about this upcoming school year. So I'm going to watch Goal closely and see how they progress. It looks like they're both, Pueblo and Grand Junction are off to a good start. I attended the Club 20 debates with candidates last week in Grand Junction, which was very lively, I must say. And 2 weeks ago, I went to a final subcommittee meeting of ELC. I went to the Teachers and Leaders Subcommittee, and the meeting was at the University of Northern Colorado in Lowry, and Angelica was also at this meeting. I sat in one of the areas where different groups came and answered the same question, and it was very interesting how 3 or 4 people together approach a problem differently, and I found that very, very interesting, and I know that this group has a very challenging, difficult job to do, but I'm looking forward to the results of this group. I also attended a groundbreaking ceremony at Colorado Mountain College campus in Spring Valley and toured the campus. They have over 200 dorm rooms there, and this is a 2-year school. September 11th, which was just yesterday, I went to the IM Academy, which is Hope Online, and their director there is Anthony Watson, and I visited Mr. Manning. Last year I went to the 5th grade class there, and now these students are 6th graders. While I was there, I gave him a pin that had the 2 flags on it, Colorado and the U.S., and one of the 5th graders said, I would like a flag. And I said, well, we're going to have to figure out how to earn it. When I was a 5th grade teacher, I had all the students, before they went to 6th grade, they had to name all the capitals of the states. So Mr. Manning called me back this year, and yesterday I went, and they had 13 students there that came and got their flag pins because I grilled them on the different states, and they knew the capitals. And now he said that they put that in for the middle school kids, and they want me to come back in May, so I think I have my work cut out for me. I know I have to order some more. Let's see, and I have to say, I've got a couple of pictures, and since Busy isn't here, I just couldn't do it to Melissa. So I have
did
them.
it to her.
I noticed, I noticed. You had some lead time on it, though, but I have 2 pictures, and I will give you the thumb drive, and later today, I have a pretty funny picture of Swoop. As you all know, Swoop is the mascot, Eagle mascot for CMC, Colorado Mountain College, and he is in a picture with Representative Rankin and myself, which is, the groundbreaking is pretty funny, and I'd like to share that later on, so that's pretty much all I'm doing.
I have one question from your report. I'm getting a little confused about online schools that have lots of students there. Are they actually online, or are there?
It was
bricks and-
registration, it was at the beginning of the year, and some have already gone to their local school and now have decided to enroll. So there were parents and students there, and
So there is an enrollment place? Because
Oh,
it's
oh.
multi-district.
yes, and there are places in throughout the state, and I went to 2 of the biggest. I haven't been to any others, but I have to say, when I think of online, I think of students just totally by themselves. When I go there, they have coaches there, and students have to come in so often, and some of them come in twice a week at goal and work with a coach or look over the work they're doing to make sure they're on track. And I'm sure it's up to goal how they do it, but I do know every time I've been there, there have been coaches and students, but never the amount that I saw. But again,
Okay.
they are enrolled. But I think it was
So
more
there's
as
sort of,
blended.
it seems like there's a progression. If you hear that and you talk about Hope, you have sort of a progression of a quasi-online.
I call it blended learning,
Blended
and I
learning,
do
yes.
believe, well, with Hope, I know, because I've talked to them about it, they started out online. They realized that, especially elementary students, but the students need more support than that.
I
And
just think we ought to keep that in our minds when we talk later on about the.
yes, yes, and they
What-
do have, the school I visited, the whole first floor is, I believe, K-6, and then the upstairs is 8-12, so it's almost like 2 separate schools divided by stairs.
So some brick and mortar.
Yes.
Board Member
yes.
Durham, did
I
you?
think most, perhaps not all, but certainly I think most of the online schools have are some form of blended. I think that's the best term. Some sort of blended learning seems to lead to improved results than just straight
That's right.
online.
Yeah, I agree.
Board Member Goff?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Ms. Rankin, what campus of Hope Online, was it a certain, you mentioned about being at a school with 5th
Yes.
grade, where?
I'm very bad on directions, but it was in Denver.
Yeah. I've been to that. It's,
Well, there are several around the metro area, I was
Right.
just curious.
I would
It's
guess
in the
it
north
was
side.
northwest.
yep. Because I've been
Yes,
there.
we've been there before,
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
But I'm not good on directions, and I don't know this side of the mountain as well as. Yes,
Yeah.
Hope Online. And the, a couple of the people that work there were gonna come in today, so I can ask them later when they come in, and I'll tell you.
But it's DPS. Is it within?
Well, it's multi-district.
Okay, but it's within
It
Mhm.
was,
DPS
DPS kids.
Right.
boundaries.
There's another in
I
Aurora.
would think so. I should know the name of that school.
There's another one in
Really sorry.
Greeley.
Okay.
Board Member McClellan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had an opportunity to meet with stakeholders from Douglas and Arapahoe and Adams counties throughout the last month. And I'm looking forward to talking again with members of the Colorado Special Education Advisory Committee for their regular meeting later in the month. I was especially pleased to be able to go to Adams County at the invitation of Chalkbeat, who held a special education listening tour. And so we heard concerns and appreciation from members of the special education community, including some school administrators, some folks from ARC of North Metro, and mostly from parents. So it was good to kind of get that input about what their concerns were, what worked for them, what didn't work. So I just want to thank the folks at Chalkbeat and ARC for sponsoring that event. It was a very good event.
Thank you. Board Member Schaffel?
Thank you. Yes, I also met with CDE staff remotely to discuss the whole focus on dyslexia. There's been a lot of constituents around the state that are interested in looking at that issue and how well those students are served in our schools. So it's great to talk about surfacing that issue on behalf of the public. Also, talking a little bit about the READ Act. I see we have an annual report that will be great to get through, but also the idea of how are we defining a reading goal. And of course, there's different ways of doing it based on risk, based on actual grade level. And so it was good to be thinking about that as we relook at the READ Act in terms of its effectiveness with our students. Been going to a lot of events, been working on something called World-Class Teacher Preparation, just doing some research on that. It's associated with the American Council of Trustees. I'm going out to Chicago in September to talk to some folks about that and how we can look at teacher prep to enhance its effectiveness with teachers so that they're more effective in the classroom. Has a lot to do with clinical practice and the hours they spend in schools actually applying what they know. And then finally doing some work with a group on teaching of writing, and it relates to our standards. We saw our data come out a month or two ago. Our achievement data in writing and literacy and math, we continue to have challenges in these core areas. And how can we think about instruction that works and research-based practices? And so that's been a good research group to be meeting with, so thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Goff.
Well, it's been busy. I attended 2 ribbon cuttings. One in Mapleton School District, and one of them was the result of a BEST grant, but the other one was a result of a community passing a bond issue that had been in waiting for a very long time. So it's always encouraging and really exciting for the communities when they can open brand new schools. Quite a bit of time devoted and spent with the Colorado Teacher of the Year selection and screening process. We have a lot to be proud of in our state by way of our teaching staff, and I think when the winner is announced, which will be later this fall, everyone will be as excited for that person as we are at the department. Also took part in the announcement in 2 schools of the preliminary performance framework announcements. Kearney Middle School in Adams 14 and also Kemp Elementary. Kearney has maintained its performance rating, and for Adams 14 right now, movement upward and maintenance of achievement is particularly important. So it was good to celebrate along with them. The Westminster Chamber of Commerce has quite a strong business education partnership in the Westminster North Jeffco area, and last week they sponsored a showcase, so to speak, of some of the projects that the students are involved with. Particularly close to home was the fact that this one was showcasing Stanley Lake High School, where I taught for several years, and had a chance to go back and see what today's student body is up to in the way of career and tech ed projects and expansion of those kinds of partnerships. Also, I spend time every month with my colleagues on the NASB Government Affairs Committee, and tied in with the CTE push and emphasis. Our federal budget, education budget, will soon be, hopefully, barring any potential shutdown at the end of this month, will be passed through. There has been collaboration, bipartisanship work has been done on the budget, and there is some more money provided for career and tech ed interests in the states. So we should expect to hear some good news about that. That's it primarily. It's been a good variety this past month.
Thank you. Board Member Flores.
Thank you. I forgot to add that we had the first meeting of the REACT stakeholders meeting, which will be for a year-long study of the kinds of READ plans that teachers will need to help students be successful in reading. We're still looking for grades 2 to 3rd teachers. I think there's still a need. And this is a program that will be run by Dr. Melissa Colzman. She's kind of responsible for this year-long study, and I'm part of it. So if you know any second or third grade teachers that are highly qualified and would like to participate, please call the department and ask for Dr. Melissa Colzman. Thank you.
Thank you. I have also been busy. However, the only thing that I really think would be important to report on is that I was at the ELC Teacher and Leaders meeting, and it was supposed to be our last meeting, and we were to come up with final recommendations, and there were a number of new things thrown out. It's exactly as you described. There are people just tossing out their ideas, and I have no idea how that's going to be incorporated, because they were items that a person, or maybe two or three, had an opinion about, and the rest of us really didn't get much of a chance to process it. So I have some worries about that particular. It made me very uncomfortable, because it was at the very end of the meeting that things started getting thrown out that we had never considered before. So I think that just something for you all to be thinking about, whether this reflects the consensus of a whole group or not. Because some of them actually are not things that I would support legislation around. I mean, there are a few things that are being discussed that are about legislation, and I think that's potentially problematic unless it's really a wish that's across the board. I actually couldn't even understand one of the suggestions, and I asked for an example and wasn't given one, so it was fairly frustrating. By this time, I think you had left.
Yes.
Understandably. Anyway, it's a difficult, I mean, I think we have to recognize that this is a very difficult process, and to come up with a vision that really is a collective vision is just not easy. And you have to make sure the process protects that opportunity.
Well, can I?
Board Member Goff?
Were these ideas coming from a member of the subcommittee or
Mhm.
from public?
Member of the
comment?
subcommittee. Member of the subcommittee.
Okay.
There's a bit of a disconnect between some folks in higher ed and the article that I just read on dyslexia just sort of confirmed these things that keep going around about which we really don't come to any consensus. We just kind of create a war around them, which is not going to be helpful. Board Member
There's a
Sheffield?
really good book that came out just recently that is kind of a compendium of all the research that's been done in that area, and I can
Which area?
loan it to you in dyslexia.
Yeah.
And it's this,
And this was not about
Scanning
dyslexia,
through
but
that.
it's just sort of
right,
the article that we just looked at about dyslexia just sort of
Right.
confirmed this, what's going on in higher ed and preparing teachers, and
right. The reason I
The
bring that up
research,
is just
that's
because I
helpful.
think anchoring in the research helps diminish some of that noise.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of issues, but really if we can just look at what works, that's what people care about, getting beyond access to quality and outcomes.
yeah, agreed, totally agreed.
She's going to get that for us, and you're going to get that for us.
Or at least get the quotation for us,
Exactly.
please. Yeah. Oh, oops.
We're gonna skip. Jennifer can stay.
Ms. Mello, sorry, but we're going to flip the schedule a little bit. Thank you. So we're now going to have public comment. Our schedule is somewhat changed. Please, you're limited to 3 minutes. And please note that our process is that we do not respond back to your comments, but we welcome them. So I'd like to call the first person, Michael Busey? Is that correct?
Hello?
Handouts?
Hello?
Hi.
Good morning. My name is Michael Busey, and I'm the father of 2 dyslexic children in the Colorado public education system. I would like to tell you about my son Felipe's experience within that system. Our family moved to Colorado in June 2016. Prior to arriving, our son, who was 7 years old at the time, had just been diagnosed with severe dyslexia by an educational psychologist. The first week of our new school, we immediately engaged with our classroom teacher and the special education teacher. We provided them with a copy of our diagnosis and asked for instructional support that would be specialized for children with dyslexia. We were promised that his situation would be addressed. Fast forward to October and our first parent-teacher conference, we're getting nervous because there had been no communication regarding Felipe's literacy plan. When we asked about dyslexia support, we were told that everything that could be done was being done and to be patient. At this point, Felipe was in 3rd grade, reading at a kindergarten level. We escalated the situation to our principal, and in December had our first student support meeting. Again, we pushed for a dyslexia support program, but we're told we don't use programs, but that they would look into a curriculum the school could obtain on a free trial basis. Following that meeting, our teacher emailed us a read plan, for which I have a copy of you today on the front. You can see that nowhere in the document is there a mention of dyslexia or any of the issues associated with, like the inability to decode simple words or to remember sight words, etc. In the goals section, it is simply stated that the area need is comprehension. The instruction prescribed was balanced literacy, which is not an effective approach for those with dyslexia. The teacher told us that the teacher told us that the form had been filled out by someone from the district who had never met our son. It was infuriating to us that despite all of our discussions, having provided a clear diagnosis, that there was no understanding. Excuse me. The read plan was, in fact, a piece of paper that didn't contain a single strategy that would help our son. Eventually, in November, he did qualify for an IEP, but unfortunately, the SPED department had no program district-wide, and they rushed to throw together an ad hoc combination of curriculum to be delivered by a SPED teacher who had no background in structured literacy or Orton Gillingham. After an entire year of lost time and escalating emotional distress, we're faced with the decision to continue in the public school system or send Felipe to a private school. The choice for our family was a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busey. Janine Wire.
Good morning, board members. My name is Janine Wire. I'm the parent of 3 children who all attend public school in the Boulder Valley School District. My eldest son has dyslexia and is currently in 4th grade. The READ Act did not work for him. It failed him miserably. It kicked in far too late, only after he'd fallen so far behind that by the time he qualified for a READ plan, he also qualified for special education. On the mandatory universal assessment, iReady, he had been just managing to get by. As the work got harder, he slowly fell further behind until one day he just couldn't keep up and everything fell apart. At this point, not only did he now qualify for a READ plan, he also qualified for special education. Our son was then invited to attend summer school as part of his plan, funded in part by the READ Act. Yet, when I inquired about reading and writing curriculum, I was told there was nothing specific. It was a STEM summer school, and my son would learn to read and write by doing science experiments. Students with dyslexia need to be identified before they begin to struggle. While some students with mild dyslexia may never need anything more than classroom accommodations to keep up with their peers, most will need some sort of structured literacy intervention. This is a fact. Another fact is that it takes much less time to catch a child up if that intervention is begun in kindergarten. Why are we asking kids to prove that they need intervention by struggling before we give them help? We know that most kids of dyslexia are going to need some sort of intervention. If we wait till they're falling behind in 2nd, 3rd, or even 1st grade, it will take more resources to catch those children up. I firmly believe that my son would not have ended up in special education if he had been identified as at risk in kindergarten and started Tier 2 intervention in structured literacy right away, or even some sort of small group targeted instruction. Instead, he only started to receive structured literacy in 3rd grade. My son had to slowly fail for 3 years before he finally got the help he needed. He has already spent almost 2 years in special education and looks to be there another 1.5 years. Not only would it have saved our family and my son a lot of heartache had he been identified in kindergarten, but it would most likely have saved the district a lot of money as well. And just a side note, I wish policy was grounded in research, because I'm tired of us parents having to trot our children's heartache and hardship and failures out in order to get an effective education for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Kirkpatrick.
Hi, I'm Wendy Kirkpatrick. I'm the mother of 2 dyslexic students and a teacher of 22 years. I'm here to advocate for universal dyslexia awareness training, early screening and intervention, and changes to the READ Act to include dyslexia. I learned more in the first month of my child's identification than I learned in the previous 21 years of coursework for elementary education or in 17 years of teacher training in 4 different districts. In 17 years, I didn't receive even an hour of training on dyslexia as a teacher, the condition that is responsible for most of reading failure. Not much has changed in the 4 years since my child's identification. I still find myself reminding my children's teachers and my colleagues that holding a dyslexic child accountable for functional spelling and workload, like his peers, is much like penalizing a child with a physical disability because he doesn't meet the standard for a mile. Just a side note, just last night, my husband and I were up late into the night trying to process with our 6th grader because he was frustrated that he was just given a textbook and a packet each day in one class, and he can't keep up with the workload. He was given a 16% on a quick write because he could only write 1 sentence in 3 minutes. This is demoralizing, and it's not because that teacher isn't well-intentioned and isn't gracious and kind. It's because she just needs more awareness and needs to know what dyslexia is. I've advocated for teacher training at my children's school. I've advocated for teacher training at my own school. I've heard comments such as, if we do an awareness event for dyslexia, we'll have to do an awareness event for every ism. Meanwhile, we will have a lice awareness presentation at our next PTA meeting. Every child in Colorado should be entitled to a teacher who at least has a basic understanding of dyslexia and its impacts and ways to accommodate them. The READ plan doesn't even mention the term dyslexia as a possible cause for significant reading deficiency. This is frustrating as a teacher. Instead, it gives parents suggestions such as visit your neighborhood library, limit screen time, and read with your child. To suggest that the only reason for reading failure is environment and lack of access to books is not only insulting, it is wrong. 1 in 5 children have some signs of dyslexia. The READ plan could be much more effective and useful to parents and teachers if there were a definition of dyslexia and the opportunity to consider it as a possible cause. Colorado also needs a universal screener in kindergarten, I'm a kindergarten teacher, to tease out all those stealth kiddos who may be flying under the radar. We know from decades of research that early intervention works. Why wait for these kiddos to fail if we could administer a screener designed to identify dyslexic characteristics and then intervene immediately? Intervening early is proven to be far more cost effective than waiting for them to fail after 2 to 3 years of reading instruction. All over the country, parents, teachers, school systems, and universities are getting behind dyslexia awareness, screening, and early intervention. Laws in many states are making it impossible for school systems to ignore the reality that dyslexia accounts for much of our reading failure. What will we choose to do in Colorado? Will we continue to ignore the impact that dyslexia has on literacy success for our children? Or will we choose to live out our mission and ensure that every child in Colorado can read? Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Rojas.
Hi, my name is Eileen Krenzel Rojas, and I'm the parent of 2 children, 3rd and 1st graders in the Boulder Valley School District. This past May, at the end of kindergarten, I was informed that my son was identified with a significant reading deficiency through the READ Act. I scheduled a meeting with the teacher and basically agreed to read to my son every day. There was no mention by the teacher of dyslexia. This reading every day is something that I've been doing with him since before he could talk and walk. This meeting was not an exercise that I found particularly useful, but time will tell. What I actually want to draw your attention to is with regards to my third grade daughter for whom the READ Act was never enacted. In kindergarten, her teacher told me that she had never seen a child as disconnected between letters and sounds as my daughter. That summer, we began vision therapy. Soon, we began private articulation therapy as well as private work with an Orton Gillingham tutor. Halfway through second grade, she was diagnosed with dyslexia and auditory processing disorder. Shortly after, we started her with 3 different private tutoring programs. 2 interventions are ongoing today. I have estimated the cost of all of these private therapy sessions and assessments to be around $18,000 to date. This is money that has been well spent. My husband and I are blessed to be able to afford this type of intense private tutoring for our child. Today, my daughter is reading just below grade level in both English and Spanish, thanks to all the private tutors who have worked with us. My children attend University Hill, one of the 2 bilingual Spanish-English elementary schools in BVSD. In general, we have received nothing but support from the teachers and principals at the school. They all want to do what is best for my daughter and to be able to support her with the appropriate accommodations. What the school cannot do is give her support in the type of interventions that are appropriate for her needs. I'd like to give you guys an idea of the demographics at Uni Hill. 74% of the students are minority. 57% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. 49% are English language learners. This is a very vulnerable school population. These students are not just English language learning minorities living in poverty. Statistics tell us that 15 to 20% of all students have dyslexia. 2 to 3% have auditory processing disorder. My point is that these are bright, capable, smart students whose educational problems are being overlooked because they have a label of being a minority or an English language learner or a student living in poverty. These students are not screened for dyslexia. Schools are designed to let these students fail, not succeed. Once the child fails enough, they're put into special education, which does not provide appropriate accommodations for a dyslexic child. Until changes are made at the state level, mandating that all school districts in Colorado must provide all students with the free and appropriate public education that they need and deserve, we will continue to see the achievement gap. I was educated enough about dyslexia to understand that there was a difference in my daughter's learning style. I'm amazingly blessed to be able to financially support my daughter. But my husband and I are able to afford the $500 to $600 per month. But do you think that you can say this about the 57% of the students at Uni Hill who are living at poverty? Do you think that this immigrant community with parents who are not proficient in English and working 2 to 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet are able to take their child to private tutoring because the school is incapable of helping their child? No. And that's why we're asking for you guys to educate the teachers about dysgraphia, dyslexia, and other common learning disabilities so that all students can be correctly educated.
Thank you. Sarah Vaught?
True or false? Speaking is natural, reading and writing are not. Just think about that for a minute. I'm here to express my concern about the lack of policy as it relates to the most common learning disability, dyslexia. 1 in 5 people, or up to 20% of the population, will struggle with this learning disability. Dyslexia affects more than just reading. It affects writing, spelling, language expression, math testing, and communication with peers. I'm a parent of a child who is dyslexic. My son started to struggle in 2nd grade when, it's natural, right? When the pressure of school got to be too much for him. With notes of wanting to hurt himself, we took him to a psychologist. And let me just say, 3 weeks out of school, he was completely back to normal. 3rd grade kept getting harder for him, and we still didn't understand why he was not keeping up with his peers. 4th grade, we got a diagnosis on our own and put him in a specialized school for dyslexic learners. Now he's in 6th grade and reads at least 2 grade levels below his peers. The gap continues to grow with no interventions offered in school. I have 3 kids. 2 are typical learners and 1 is not. I have witnessed firsthand the emotional consequences that also occur when a child who has a learning disability struggles in an environment that is molding their self-esteem. We learn very early that our grades are important and that successful and smart people do well in school. Our experience in school influences the way we perceive our abilities and worth as a person. The most frustrating thing as a parent is to know that my child, the one who struggles with dyslexia, does not feel confident in school with even though his cognitive abilities are the same as his siblings who are made to feel successful. My son learns differently, and he needs an approach that works for him. You cannot fine-tune a Ferrari with a fork. You need a skilled team with specific tools to build something fabulous. Our family has spent thousands of dollars to identify my son's dyslexia and to provide evidence-based instruction from a skilled team using specific tools. We continue to sacrifice our time and money to do a job that the schools are unequipped to handle. So I want you to think for a second about someone you know that has struggled in school. Were they the kid that sat in the hallway or spent time in the principal's office, maybe doodling instead of note-taking, or was always in the lowest reading group? Maybe you also thought to yourself that that person is also smart but just couldn't figure out school. Maybe you thought, man, that boy can draw, or that girl can sing, or that kid tells the best stories. Dyslexic students have talents and strengths in a lot of areas, but if a child is not given the opportunity to feel successful in the areas that they are constantly measured in, reading, writing, math, so forth, they lose on the playing field and in life. So I suppose that most politicians enter into their career thinking that they're going to make a difference in the lives of others. Here's your chance to make a difference for 20% of the population. The answer is true, by the way. Speaking is natural, reading and writing are not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who wanted to speak who did not sign up? Thank you. That concludes public participation. Ms. Mello, are you ready? I'm trying to figure out whether we should take a break, but I think maybe if we could have your discussion and then take a quick break.
My apologies. I
Welcome
stepped out,
back.
Thank you, to make a quick phone call, and that was not resolving itself as quickly as I had hoped. Good morning. It's nice to see you all. So, as you know, we're at a point in the election cycle where there's a lot of campaigning going on, a lot of commercials, a lot of mailings, and that means that for all 65 members of the House of Representatives and the half of the senators who are where there are elections, they're pretty focused on their races right now. When we have an election year, we tend to be a little slower in terms of getting started and what legislation will come in the following year, just given the kind of nature of the electoral realities. So I don't, we like to joke about my crystal ball and how cloudy or clear it is. I don't even have one right now. So I'm not even going to talk about any of that, although I'm happy to respond to any questions if you guys are hearing things that you'd like to dialogue about. I thought what I would do is just give you a quick update on the interim committees that are meeting around K-12 education issues. Let me just pause real quick and yes, seems to be how you would like me to proceed. Okay, good. The first interim committee is the Early Childhood and School Readiness Committee. That one is farthest along in its work. They've already started discussing bill drafts. They will present those bill drafts at their next meeting, which is in October, I believe. And these are just, what I'm going to describe to you are things that they have talked about in public. I don't have a lot of detail, right? These are just, at this point in the process, these are big picture ideas. We don't have the bill language yet that would kind of operationalize those ideas, and obviously once we do, I can share that. But the Early Childhood Committee is looking at an income tax credit for early childhood educators, looking at something to require, so they've gotten very involved in the dyslexia conversation, and I know that that's something that a lot of you have been hearing about as well. Potentially a bill that would require, so in order to get a teacher's license, you would have to include standards. The license, you'd have to meet standards around the ability to meet the needs of kids with dyslexia. That was really poorly worded on my part. In other words, some sort of requirement added to the teacher licensing requirements around being able to identify and treat students with dyslexia. And then also dyslexia related, they're looking at how you would include that within the READ Act construct, again, both for screening and for identification and for support and services. So I think that's one where the details, the details are going to really matter, and it'll be important to look closely at that. Right now, we just have the concept. The second interim committee that's meeting that might be of interest is the School Start Time Committee. So this one only has 3 total meetings. They had their first one at the end of August on the 31st. They received testimony from several school districts, and they got a presentation on the science behind changing school start times, and they have not talked about any bills yet. So they're just getting started. And then finally, the Interim School Finance Committee. As a reminder, this one has been around. This is a 2-year committee, so this started its work last year. It's continuing its work this year. they're struggling to find consensus, and you all can probably relate a little bit to that. These are challenging topics, and there's, some pretty distinct viewpoints on them. So they really have not gotten to a point of talking about legislative specifics yet. I think they're really working to see what they can agree on, if anything. We'll see. They have a meeting coming up on the 17th, and it's not really a traditional meeting as you guys are doing right here. They've got their vendor coming in with like electronic versions of school finance models, and the legislators are going to get to interact with that and kind of, I presume, play around with things like, well, what if we put more money here? What does that mean over here? And, I think try to get a more operational understanding of the school finance formula, both in its present form and, in terms of potential options as to what it could be. So. And then I'll just note, and this is obviously not something that is coming from the department or the legislature, but Initiative 93, which will be on the ballot this fall, is a fairly significant component of the conversation around education and school finance. This is the one that a variety of education
73.
stakeholders. 73?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's Amendment 73.
It's Amendment 73.
Okay.
It had another number. It had another number.
I'm so sorry. I looked that up last night because I was really trying to be right about that, and I messed that up. My apologies. Well, I'm glad you all know what I'm talking about, though. Okay, so anyway, it would raise about $1.6 billion. As you probably know, it's a combination of increases in corporate taxes and income taxes on individuals and families making more than $150,000 a year. I will just one thing to note: it requires 55% of the vote to pass. So it's not a 50+1 situation because it's a constitutional amendment, which is why the amendment makes more sense than the initiative. I should have caught that. There is a higher threshold, so we'll see how that turns out. And again, I only mention it because if it passes, I think it's going to have a very significant impact on ongoing conversations, not just about school finance, but about education policy in general. Because one of the common themes we see all the time, when we want to do something in K-12 education is a concern from school districts that they've been under-resourced and they just don't have the capacity to do more. So I think if it passes, it'll be interesting to see how it impacts kind of the tone of those conversations about just general changes in education policy, even ones that don't directly relate back to school finance. So that's it. Any questions?
Board Member Durham.
I think, Ms. Mel, I think you omitted on Amendment 73 that there's a significant property tax component to that amendment, and some of the conversations I had with legislative council staff, it would appear that amendment would result in about a 12.3% increase in property taxes for single-family residences going forward as a result of not getting a reduction in the assessment level when you do get a reappraisal. So there'll be ongoing significant increases in residential individual property taxes over time, and that's a significant part of the the 1.6 billion. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Melville or comments? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Have a great meeting.
See you next month.
I think, Madam Chair, I think Dr. Flores asked if that's for upper income, and no, that's for every property taxpayer regardless of income.
It's a wealth tax, not a
No,
income
no,
tax.
no.
It is a wealth.
No,
It's-
property tax is a wealth tax. It's the
Mm.
value of what you own as opposed to
Right,
an
it-
income.
It has nothing to do with your ability to pay.
Well, that's a
Most of us
philosophical article.
have that problem.
I don't think that's for me to comment
Yeah.
on.
Thank you. So may I request that you all, let's take a break and back in 10 minutes, please. We'll be close to on schedule.
Can I ask you what your interest
Our next item is proposed meeting dates for the board for 2019. Is there a motion on the table, please?
I'll move the dates as proposed.
It's a proper motion. Do I have a second, please? Second. Lots of seconds. You pick one.
May I ask a question?
Please.
This is for just the set meetings, it's not about extra meetings that we might.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And please note that in October of next year, we will have a one-day meeting on Thursday.
How do you know that?
Because I read that.
Well, how do you know we only need one day? Is it usually?
Well,
You might have something come up.
then we adjust it. But however, the Wednesday is a holiday, and it probably would not be on that Wednesday. I'm actually my husband reminded me this morning that exactly 5 years ago, we had a Wednesday board meeting only, and I drove home in torrential rain, terrified that I wouldn't get home, and then it rained all the next day, and then the water got in Boulder got it
Yes, it was
big.
the flood.
That was the the flood 5 years ago. I think today's the anniversary thereof. Yeah. And I was looking up today and I thought, this is not gonna be a repeat. It's actually something that has been on my mind for a long time, because when I served on the Boulder Valley School Board, we have a high school that is right there along Boulder Creek. And there were often discussions about, is that really an appropriate place for us to have a high school, if we have a 100-year flood? And this flood, it turns out, was more than a 100-year flood, and the high school remains. It did not get it. There've been a lot of efforts made, and the greatest damage was further to the east. Anyway. Are we ready for a vote on the schedule for next year? Any objection to the schedule for next year? Let's try that. All right, passed unanimously, please. Now I know why you all are sitting in front of us. Next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the 2018 preliminary school and district performance framework results. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. I mentioned this in my commissioner report, but the staff have been hard at work getting out the preliminary school performance frameworks and district performance frameworks, and this is the initial presentation to you all on that. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley Pesci, the Director of Accountability and Data Analysis, and also Alan Dillon, who is our newer Associate Commissioner over School Quality and Support. So, oops, oh, yes. I stole the clicker, so it's just like at home. You know, who has the flicker?
Who has the
and that was me. So, and then Ms. Pearson is also here as support, since she's been helping in this process as well. So, Ms. Pesci? So, can you use your microphone? Yeah.
Perfect. Good morning. So today we'd like to give an overview of the school and district performance frameworks, and then share a summary of the 2018 results. We'll go through the 2018 accountability timeline just to see where we are in the process. And then we'd like to spend a little bit of time at the end talking through, or just giving an introduction to the performance framework target setting conversation that we'd like to have in October and vote on in November. So starting with an overview. Colorado's accountability system is based on the belief that every student should receive an excellent education and graduate ready to succeed. And we are bound by federal and state statute, with federal statute having a strong focus on identifying schools with low graduation rates and identifying schools with low performance of historically underserved students. And both the federal and state statutes focus on identifying low overall performance of students based on state assessments and post-secondary and workforce readiness indicators. And that's when we're talking about identifying schools for support. So for the state, the Colorado Educational Accountability Act is the foundation of our state accountability requirements, and it calls for one set of outcome data to determine overall district and school accountability, and that here in Colorado is the performance frameworks. And so all districts receive a district performance framework, all schools receive a school performance framework, and these determine the district accreditation ratings and the school plan types. And then we also identify those schools and districts with the greatest need in order to direct resources and support and potential consequences. And so that's in the form of our accountability clock that we have here in the state. And so a quick overview of what goes into those frameworks. For elementary and middle schools, 40% of the points that are on the frameworks are comprised of academic achievement. 60% are related to student academic growth. For high schools and districts, 30% of the points on the frameworks relate to student academic achievement, 40% relate to academic growth, and then an additional 30% relate to post-secondary and workforce readiness.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
A quick
Mr. Durham?
question. Are these set in statute or are they determined by the board?
So they're not
The
the
board.
board, yeah, so they're in board rule. They're not in the statute, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yet.
And so for the frameworks, we determine, or through the frameworks, we determine school plan types and district accreditation ratings. And so the plan types available are performance plans, which is our highest performance, improvement plan, priority improvement plan, turnaround plan, and then we have 2 categories of insufficient state data. For the districts, they can receive an accredited with distinction plan, an accredited plan, an improvement plan, priority improvement, and turnaround. And they also have 2 categories for insufficient state data. In addition to those ratings, we prescribe descriptors for participation on the frameworks. And so a school or a district can have the meets participation, which means that they were above 90%, 95% actual participation rate in 2 or more content areas. Low participation, which means they were below 95% participation rate in 2 or more content areas. And they can be decreased due to participation if they fall below that 95% participation rate mark once parent excusals are removed in 2 or more content areas. All right, so that's a quick overview, and now we're going to get into the results for 2018. So for 2018, this is a display of how our districts fell. And so we have 23 districts that were accredited with distinction this year based on preliminary results. We have 93 that were accredited, 52 that have were accredited with an improvement plan, 9 accredited with a priority improvement plan, and 3 accredited with a turnaround plan. And then we have insufficient state data, which comprise about a little less than 3% of overall of districts fell into that insufficient state data category. And so these percentages look similar to what we've seen in the past 2 years. So this next graph compares 2016, 2017, and 2018 distributions of ratings for districts. And so we don't see a lot of shift within the 4 or the top 3 plans, so distinction, accredited, improvement. We see a little bit of shift in priority improvement, where we have fewer priority improvement districts this year, around the same amount of turnaround districts percentage-wise, and then we see kind of a consistent decrease in those number of districts that are getting insufficient state data. So we have 2% of our districts receiving that preliminary this year, coming down from 7% in 2016 for insufficient state
So
data.
I noticed on page 9 that you have all of these listed at 1%. But let's see, so the total of 5 out of 185. That's less than.
When you add, yes,
Right.
when we add them together, yep. That's, so we
So-
rounded on
So the
page
number,
9.
the number of schools, so the number of districts where we have insufficient data is relatively small.
Yes, yes, and has been
Thank you.
decreasing
Thank
for the
you.
past 3 years. Yep. And then looking at participation for districts, so that participation descriptor. In 2016, we had 45% of our districts meet that 95% participation mark. 2017, we had 49% of our districts, and this year we saw 61% of our districts receive that meets participation descriptor with preliminary ratings. So we see an increase there in participation. For low participation, we see a similar trend where we are in the opposite direction, where we started at 45% of our districts receiving that low participation descriptor in 2016, and now we're down at 31% of our districts receiving that with preliminary ratings. And we have fewer districts that were decreased due to participation as well. And so in 2016, we had 11% that were decreased due to participation, and this year we have 8% that received that with the preliminary rating. So we're seeing increased participation across the state. And for districts that are on the clock, so we have 171 of our districts, or 92% of our districts that are not on the clock. We actually have 9 districts that are year 1. Those districts are Sheridan, Deer Trail, Byers, Los Animas, Burlington, Plateau Valley, Montezuma Cortez, Centennial Boces, and San Juan Boces. And 4 of those districts have been on the clock previously. So we have 4 of them that are returning. They bounced off last year returning. And then we have 6 that are actually brand new to the clock. We have 2 districts that remain in year 3. And
May I
that
ask a question about that?
Board Member Durham.
Sorry.
Sure.
Yep.
Los Animas, are they returning to the clock, or is this their first year? Do you know off the top
Los
of your head?
Animas, I have them they were not on the clock 2014, 2016, so they are new to the clock, yeah.
Isn't that the district where we approved the online school? Is that a factor in their being on the clock? Do you know, Ms. Pearson?
I would need to dig into the data to confirm that, but I
Would you
think
mind
not at all.
doing
I'll
that?
let you know.
Thank you.
And Ms. Pesci, could I just clarify? I think you said year 1, 9, but the slide says 10 just for
Yes,
public.
that's a typo, sorry.
Okay.
So there are 9 on
Okay,
the clock
I
this
just
year.
want to be sure since it's on the record.
Yes.
So where do you at, does that one go up to not on the clock to come up with 185?
Yes, so that year 1 is not on the clock, correct. That one that is missing.
Okay, so it's 172, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
thank you. And also,
Continue.
can I?
Yeah, continue.
On the percent of districts, I added it up, it's 99. Where's that 1% go?
For the percents that are listed?
It's probably rounded
So that
somewhere.
is, yeah, I would say that's rounding as well. And I can look up the percentages, see which one is not adding up, but that would be a rounding.
Okay.
Board Member Flores.
Yes, I just wanted to, I know Sheridan's in my district. What other what other districts are on it? Could you name them again?
Sure. So the 9 that are year 1 are Sheridan, Deer Trail, Byers, Los Animas, Burlington, Plateau Valley, Montezuma Cortez, Centennial Boces, and San Juan Boces for those districts that are new to the clock this year.
So Montezuma Cortez
So
is
Sheridan
back
would
on.
be mine.
Yes. They were on in 2016, and now they are back on again.
Oh, Sheridan's on it too.
And then we have,
Did you guys give us, oh no, we don't have this yet until all the appeals are done. Is that right, that we actually get the?
so you should have a spreadsheet that, yes, that outlines all of these. You do not have, yes, exactly. That is what you have. So you have the preliminary ratings for schools and districts.
And it's broken down by congressional.
And where
It
is
is,
that?
yes. It's in your email inboxes, so we can resend that as well.
Oh, you said that.
We sent that on the 27th of August.
I like
you
the way she
resend-
has
I
it all
like the
put
way
together.
she has it too.
Yeah.
Can I have one like that?
Yes, yes.
Yep. You're gonna do it.
Some of us don't have that kind of paper.
No.
Or printer or.
I just taped it together, it's just 8 by 11.
Well,
We can take you a set.
Board Member McClellan.
Of course, when I was going through this, I had to go onto the website and try to figure out which schools had which ratings, and then I reread and realized that you were allowing for reconsideration maybe, and so it's either embargoed or semi-embargoed until that process is done. But then I went back and tried to find the historical results just to kind of get a feel, and I had a devil of a time trying to locate that on our website.
Yep.
Help me with that.
Yes. So it can help you with that for sure. We do have historical ratings listed on our website, and we actually are in the process of a website refresh to make it easier to find that. So we can send you that data or those links so you can get to that data.
So it wasn't just me.
It's not just you, and you actually do the spreadsheet that you have printed out, it does have historical data as well. So you can look up how schools have done since 2010 in the spreadsheet that we sent as well. Yep. And it's good that you actually mentioned so these are preliminary results. I know we mentioned that, but we will go into what request reconsider is, but that is the process by which districts can essentially submit additional data if they believe that their rating for the school or district is not representative of what's actually happening. And then just for context, last year we had 20 districts apply or go through the request reconsider process, 16 were approved, so 16 of those ratings changed. Last year we had 145 schools go through that process and 109 ratings were changed. So we have some ratings that will change between now and December.
And that's basically because they can provide some other evidence of a different result.
Yes. they can. So we have a
Okay.
list of conditions that districts can submit a request, and a lot of them are around the evidence, so they submit additional data. But there are other conditions as well that they can request.
Thanks.
Yep.
Go ahead, move forward, please.
All right, so we have the same couple of slides for schools as well. And so here you can see the distribution of schools for 2018 based on preliminary data. We have around 65% of our schools at the performance level, 19% at improvement, 6% at priority improvement, and 2% at the turnaround plan. We have a lower percentage of schools that fall into those 4 insufficient data buckets. And so that equals up to about 2% when you add those all together. And then we have 92 schools that are awaiting an AEC framework, and those will actually be released this afternoon. And then we have some new schools and some schools that are closed, so they don't receive ratings.
Madam Chair. Sorry.
Board Member Durham?
This, we have 64.6% of the schools in the highest ranking. Would it be possible to, obviously not today, but to have the percentage of students that are in each of those schools in each of those categories?
We can, and actually I looked that up for, off the top of my head, I have that for schools who end up on the clock. And it actually is pretty similar. So the percentage of students that are on the clock are 8%, and that roughly matches the between 7 and 8% that are of the schools that are on the clock this year. So the student population seems to
Fair.
match the percentages of schools and districts, but we can get
So
those details
that's all right.
for you.
If it's close, then I don't need it. Thank you.
Yep.
Board Member Goff?
Thank you. Again, memory refresher. Pending AEC framework, that the vast majority of that group are schools that are already designated as AECs, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so do you have right off the top of your head what the number of schools that were awaiting determination as to go to AEC status?
So
It seemed like there were like 10 or I don't remember.
Yes, so
And
that was at this August board meeting, we presented a list of AECs, well, we voted on a list of AECs that were requesting designation.
Right.
And I have to look up the exact number, but it was fewer than 10 for sure.
It was fewer than 10.
Yeah, of the new schools, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So, here's what I want to know. Of the schools that are on the performance plan, that are elementary, I'd like to know the percentage of the 3rd graders who are reading at proficiency. I just can't disconnect my brain from the measures that we use in the strategic plan. I need help. I need, not today and maybe not even next month, but when you're doing this, can we be thinking about our strategic plan? Where do these things tell us if we're getting where we say we want to go?
Yep.
I would be grateful. I hope you guys agree.
Yes, and we can, and if there are other requests like that, that would be great to hear before we present in December. So we'll present the final plan types in December. So it'd be great to get an idea of the kinds of analyses that you want us to do for that presentation.
Well, don't offer me that because.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
And if we're asking for that, thank you. If we're asking for that, I would ask to see the number of kids that have left the gap in our part of the performance. And I know we have performance and improvement.
We have a goal, Board Member Flores, that says that 20% more historically underserved students will achieve academic expectations.
We have
and
a
I think-
goal, but-
I think that fits into what you're asking for, isn't it?
Well, I'm asking how many did perform, how many did get out? I mean, we have a goal of 20, but how many did do it?
Yeah.
Right. yeah, make that connection to where, are we
Right.
getting to that, at least 20% of those, 20% growth in that group?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yep, those are great
Thanks.
suggestions. So then now looking across the years at the distribution of schools, again, we don't see a lot of change here. We see a slight uptick in the number of schools who are in the performance plan category. And so going from around 58% of our schools falling in that category in 2016 to 65% falling in that category in 2018. We don't see a lot of changes in the other areas, but just a slight uptick where we have schools kind of moving up the rating scale from turnaround up to
Right.
performance, yes.
Board Member Flores?
But we have to remember too, that an 84, an achievement of 84 is still an improvement. I mean, isn't the scale,
Where's 84?
if your grade is lower than 85, then your 85 is kind of high there, but we don't show that. We just have, instead of having I'm still kind of thinking that we should have a 5.
So we're gonna actually talk about that at the end of this presentation. We talk about
5 point
performance
scale.
indicators and the targets.
Okay.
We're not gonna be talking about how the cut scores for like what schools get into performance and improvement and prior to improvement turnaround. But that could be another conversation for sure. But yes, so it is what we're seeing
Right.
here. You have to dig a little deeper to truly interpret it, and so we'll get into that at the end of the presentation.
So I'm thinking it should be 5. I mean, 84 is just 1 point below, 84 is 1 point below 85. And 84, 83, 82, I mean, all the 80s are up there. I would say 75, possibly, and it might make us look better,
And
since other states do that.
Board Member Flores, I'm wondering if you're thinking about the 5% that's not included in your 84%, that's AHEC,
Oh,
or AEC, or whatever.
well, but I'm looking at this,
AECs.
I'm looking
AECs.
at this scale.
Right, but the bottom, those are also schools for which we don't yet have a classification.
Yeah, I'm looking at that scale. I'm looking at this scale. And I'm not looking at this. I'm just still, I mean, way back, I thought it should be into 5 categories instead of the 4. But because of how we've had it before, we're not going into 5, although I think it would be more advantageous of us to still do a 5-point, category instead of the 4-point.
Just adding another category on it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Board Member Durham?
thank you. The, in comparing we have this odd situation where we have 4 ratings, 4 categories for schools, 5 for districts. But if you look at the highest rating for a district, 12% are in there, but 12% of the districts. But if you look at the highest percentage, or the highest rating for schools, 64% are in there. And of course, that,
64.6.
I just wonder if that's 64%, because every one of those schools is going to express to their parents, or to the parents, that they're in the highest rating. And I wonder if that isn't making the job of parents because obviously some of those schools could be almost in the bottom third of all performing schools. And we do have organizations, I think generally private nonprofits, that try and provide parents guides, and we're certainly not helping them. And somehow we're sliding all of if you look at even the districts, 50% or 62% are in the top 2. So it looks like we've collapsed the school ratings in a way to push them into the top rather than redistribute them to some extent in the bottom. Is there a way we can adjust these things?
So we can definitely talk about that, yes. And I would say 2 things that, one, we can have discussions about adjusting how we have those cut points for where schools fall. I know that the ratings are spelled out in statutes, so we do have 5 spelled out for districts and
Right,
4
yes,
for
I
schools,
know.
but we can adjust how we do that. second thing is that just the purpose of the accountability system, I think, is to identify those lower schools so we can prioritize support and provide all that. And so it does do a good job of doing that because we have those lower numbers and those turnaround and priority improvement buckets, but then there's a lot of differentiation that can happen within performance and improvement for sure. There's differences between those schools.
When you get 64% one category, you obviously have significant gradations
Yep.
that are not being clearly expressed to those who may have an interest in the difference, so.
Yep.
But it sounds like that's not what the Accountability Act wanted to focus on. The intent was to focus on those schools where things were not working.
Right,
And that was kind of a fundamental belief that to the extent that you're a school that does not have poor performance, it's a local control state, and we're gonna let the board fuss with that
And that-
differentiation that you're thinking about.
I think I agree, but the question is if you're in the bottom 38%, how well are you performing if you're right at that level, and is that something that should be of concern? And I think the answer is yes, it should be.
Yeah,
but-
the bottom part.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you.
Something Dean here.
And just an additional point too, just that it is possible, and even for parents hopefully, to go one step lower and see the number or the percentage of points that
Right.
are earned, right? So you can see where schools fall out within that performance bucket, but it is, when we generally talk, we say we're a performance school and don't give you on that, so, yeah. So now for participation for schools. We see the similar trend here with schools as we did with districts, and so we had 61% of our schools get that meets 95% participation descriptor in 2016. This year we have 74%, so we see that increase there. We had 32% receive that low participation descriptor in 2016. Now we have 23% of schools receiving that. And we had 7% of our schools decrease due to participation in 2016, and now we see 3% of our schools being decreased due to participation. So we're seeing a similar trend at schools, the school level as we do at the district level. And so for our schools on the accountability clock, 92% of our schools are not on the clock, so fall within those performance and improvement plans. And then we have schools that are on every year. So for year one, we have 81 schools that reach year one this year, 25 schools that are year two, 13 schools that are year three, 8 schools are year four, 3 schools that are year 5, 2 schools that are year 6, and we have 6 that remain on year 8. For the schools that are on year one, of the 81, we have 15 of those, or 19%, that were on the clock in 2016. So those are schools that were on in 2016, came off for 1 year, and are now back on the clock.
I'm sorry, what was that number again?
Yep, 15 of those schools, 15 of the 81 were on the clock as recently as 2016. And then overall, we have 33 of those 81 schools that are year one that have been on the clock previously sometime in the past.
Grr. Yeah.
Yeah.
76?
33 of
33,
the
I'm
81
sorry.
have been on the clock at some time in the past, and 15 of those as recent as 2016. For some celebrations for the clock, we had 6 schools that were, we had 6 districts that came off the clock this year. Those districts are Westminster Public Schools, Inglewood, South Conejos, Ignacio, Carval, and East Otero. And celebrations on the school side, we had a lot of schools come off the clock, but wanted to highlight the schools that were year 5 or above that came off this year. These are schools that have come before the state board previously. So in Douglas County, we had Hope Online Learning Academy Middle School come off the clock and receive an improvement plan. In Pueblo 60, we had Bessemer Elementary School that was previously year 7 come off the clock and receive an improvement plan. In Greeley, Prairie Heights Middle School, which previously year 7, received the performance plan this year. In Montezuma Cortez, Mana Elementary School, which was previously year 6, came off of the clock and received an improvement plan. In Greeley, Martinez Elementary School, which was previously year 6, received a performance plan. And in Aurora Paris Elementary School, which was previously year 5, received an improvement plan.
So when do the changes in the law from last year take effect? So that these schools have to stay off 2 years?
Sure. It takes effect in 2019, so July 1, 2019. which means that the first year that would come into effect is when schools are on the clock next year. They'll be on the clock. The following year, that 2-year to come off will come into effect for the schools that are beyond year 1.
So these are not affected?
These are
So not affected.
not
Yeah,
affected,
right,
that's right. So
that's
these
right.
schools are off the clock this year.
Okay.
Yep.
May I?
Board Member Goff?
Yes. Stepping one page back a little bit, not directly, what would be the value, is there any value, and how possible is it to line up to show these schools that went off, came
Mhm.
back on the clock? Any parallels with leadership changes? How many of those schools had a
That was my
principal
question, too.
change and other key personnel changes?
Mhm.
I mean, if there's any patterning in that.
Plus
And
the-
then
plus
you
the
even do a
resources that they-
cross-check with that about how many of them have taken advantage of turnaround
Mhm.
Services.
turnaround grant opportunities or one of the leadership development programs that we sponsor here.
Yep.
I just like to have a colored if possible, but a way to really look at if there's a pattern in what's happening in these districts. It might be even more interesting coming up when we have a 2-year watch period and to kind of follow the undercurrent if there's any leadership change, especially leadership changes, fluctuation.
We can look into that for sure. Yep. Okay. So that was a quick summary of results. And again, to ground us in where we are in the timeline currently. So we released preliminary performance framework results to districts August 22nd, and then they became publicly available August 27th. Today at the board meeting, we're reviewing that with the board. And it says here, late September, we're going to release AEC frameworks, and those will actually be released to districts today, and then will be available publicly on Monday. When we come back in October, we're going to spend more time talking about 2019 performance framework target setting, and so try to get at some of the questions that have come up today, actually. October 15th is the deadline for request to reconsider applications to be submitted from districts. In November, we will come back and finish up the target setting conversation. We'll also have district accreditation ratings finalized after we go through the request reconsider process. In December, we will present the finalized school plan types after the request reconsider process is finalized. And then in January, we'll be back to begin rulemaking for HB 181355. And then a quick slide to describe the request reconsider process again. Districts can engage in that process if they feel a different accreditation rating or plan type better describes performance at the school or district. And we consider requests based on a set list of conditions, and everything is publicly available as well if the district submits formally, and we'll come back to you in November and December with those results. So I wanted to stop here for questions, if possible, before going on to target setting. All right. So then wanted to just open the conversation for target setting. Again, we'll be spending more time on this when we get together in October. But wanted to review the State Board of Education's role in target setting for state accountability, review existing target setting methodology, and also just mention some other opportunities we have to further this conversation. So plans for rulemaking for HB 181355, and also for developing a new growth to standard measure. And so, again, the Colorado Educational Accountability Act is the foundation of our state accountability system. Within that, it states that the board shall set, reaffirm, or revise as appropriate, ambitious but attainable statewide targets for the measures used to determine the levels of attainment of the performance indicators for the coming academic year, with the goal of raising the level of academic performance in the public schools throughout the state. And so if you are looking at a framework, what that translates to is that we are talking about the performance indicator cut points, which is within this red circle here. So within academic achievement or within academic growth or post-secondary and workforce readiness, we're determining what it means to, or what the cut point is for meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, approaching or not meeting expectations. And we are not, for target setting at least specifically, talking about what we talked about a little bit previously here, those cut points for how many points do you need to earn on the framework to be in the performance bucket, and how many points do you need to earn on the framework overall to be in the improvement bucket. So, to describe our previous methodology, our current methodology for setting these targets, what we've done is we've set targets based on percentiles. And so we've said that if a school has results within academic growth that fall above the 85th percentile, so between 85 and 100, we count that as exceeds. If the results fall between the 50th and 84th percentile, we count that as meets, and so forth, down to approaching and does not meet. And what this does is for the baseline year, within performance indicators, we tend to fall out within this distribution. So we have 15% of our schools receiving, within each sub-indicator and content area for the baseline year, receiving that does not meet rating there, or does not meet target. And then we have 35% falling within approaching, 35% falling within meets, and 15% falling within exceeds, and that's purposeful based on how we set the targets.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Board Member Durham?
Thank you. I think I've just, at least in my own mind, come upon where the disconnect is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, we've set cut points for students that in math and English would say that less than, or right at, or slightly less than 40% are proficient, if I remember the numbers that we did on the individual students. But you turn around and you show 60% of the schools in the top category.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things can't be true. Either, I mean, if you're going to use what I would characterize as a common standard, if you're going to characterize the student as not performing, you can't possibly characterize the district as performing or the school as performing. And I guess I would like to have staff look at synchronizing those two numbers.
Yep.
So that the same percentage of schools fail to meet performance standards as students. And I think that will give us and would give parents a much clearer look at, I mean, if we have confidence in where we've set the cut scores for students, we ought to be able to apply that standard across the board. So I don't know why it took me 3 years to figure that out, but that's where the disconnect is, I think, and I would really like us to take a hard look. I mean, I know we're limited to the number of categories, but we could pretty well make those adjustments. So I would like to at least see that data. Thank you.
So that's a great comment. And that's actually what we were trying to point out on this next slide. But before we move forward, do we want to?
Yeah.
Are you? Yep.
Board Member Flores?
And I think that, again, looking on, let's see, I'm on this page.
Yep.
27. And so I really believe that parents would have more of an understanding of what meets expectations were if it were, if it came down and there was a in between exceeds expectations and meets expectations. If 50 to 65 were not meeting expectations, and then 65, you'd have another category, or approaching would be that, and then 15 to 49 would be, I don't know, that's pretty low. There would be another section between 65 and 84. And I don't know what you would call it. I mean, I think that's where the meets expectations. That's a category. But below 65, I think would be maybe approaching, and then you can have the others. There should be 5 categories here instead of the 4, is my, and I've been saying this is like 4 years. And I think the agencies response has been, well, this is the way we've done it for all these years before. And I'm saying for greater meaning for parents and for students, that if we had another one between, that fell at 65 and between 84, because 84 and 85, come on, that's pretty up high. And that's like a B almost. Anything in the 80s would be such. And that gives meaning to people, because they probably were graded on that scale.
I would say
We
that's
understand that scale.
That's along the lines of the conversation we'll have in October for sure, and talking about targets. And just a reminder that these are percentiles, not percentages, right? So it's not a percentage of points earned; it's percentiles. So
Right,
we'll
but
always have a distribution of schools from 1 to 99, and so setting cut points there is what we're trying to do with the targets.
Right, I know you're trying to do, but if it went along with how people have seen it for ages, I think would help.
Board Member Flores, one more thing, just to be clear, the number of categories is set by statute, so, isn't that right? Or Alyssa's nodding at me.
Yeah.
That is correct.
It is
Yeah, so
set-
we can have additional categories here potentially. The number of categories, so your original comment to the categories of ratings is set by statute. So we only have 4 for schools, 5 for districts, and that is set by statute. And that could be a conversation that we have, but that is what we
Right.
have to follow. Yeah.
Okay. And so we have 5 for schools and,
So 4 for schools and 5 for districts, yes.
Yep, but that's the
wonder why we put
overall
everything
ratings,
in
that's the
Constitution.
performance and improvement and priority improvement. This is how we get to that. This is the components of how we look at the individual measures of achievement and growth and post-secondary workforce readiness, and how we categorize those measures that roll up to that overall rating. So these, splitting it in 4, there was a lot of analysis that was done back in 2009 and 2010 to figure out ways to do that and why we landed at 4. It's an open conversation that can be had, because it isn't described in statute, but there was rationale for why we landed there, and we can share
Okay.
that with you in the future.
that was a completely, well, there are a few people here that were on the board, but that was a different board.
Absolutely.
And possibly, maybe some of us think differently than that.
Yeah, so we can definitely revisit that. I think that would be appropriate. But then what we did try to get to in this next slide was kind of that disconnect that you were talking about, Mr. Durham. So when we set targets or cut points for targets based on percentiles, so we say, the 85th percentile exceeds expectations. When you look on this next slide, the 85th percentile across the state corresponded to a mean scale score on the ELA portion of our CMAS assessment, so from grades 3 through 8. It corresponds to a 755.9 mean scale score. So that's the average scale score of all students in a school. If you're at the 85th percentile as a school, you're at that 755.9. And then, so that's where we end up with percentiles, how that relates to what students get on their tests. So a student is considered to meet on those tests when they hit a 750 on that assessment. And so on average, students in this school, if you're at the 85th percentile and your exceeds, on average, your students are meeting expectations for the CMAS assessments. At the 50th percentile, that corresponds to 739.5 mean scale score. So that means that if you're at the 50th percentile as a school within English language arts, that corresponds to 739.5, and that would be below that 750 bar of meeting on the actual assessment. And so that's how kind of our percentiles interact with performance on the assessments at the student level. And so we can talk about that more in depth in October to see if we want to make those be more in alignment or not, or what the methodology is that we want to go forward with
It's
there.
an attempt to shift from just percentages to actual criteria.
Yeah. And what is
How well are the
perfect?
kids, how well are the kids actually performing? Do
What-
50% of the students, or what is meets expectation?
Yeah.
Right.
What is perfect?
So on the scale of the assessment, an 850 is the highest obtainable scale score. It's the highest score you can get.
850.
850, yeah. And the lowest is 650.
And then we have a similar process for PSAT. So we have a different scale because it's a different assessment, but similarly set targets currently based on percentiles. And then we can look at how that corresponds with actual performance on the assessment.
And, you know, I've been wanting to ask this question for a long time. Is it still based on achievement, or is it based on performance that can get you into college? Is a test, the PSAT, which is, you know, I mean, I remember the SAT was not an achievement test. So has the SAT been recalibrated and such so that now it's an achievement test as opposed to a, what's the test for getting into college?
So that would be a question for our assessment folks. I'm not sure I can speak to that, with detail.
I mean, in general, I mean, we have tried to align our system to be college and career ready. And so if you're performing at a certain level on the assessments, then we would expect you to be able to, you know, participate. But there are honestly some misalignments there. You know, I think we've talked about remediation rates and those sorts of things.
So it's still the same test. Could we have the SAT person, the ETS person, come up and speak to that? Is it possible at this point to say whether it is achievement or it's to get into college? I mean, you said it was, but
I think it's both, and we can certainly have
well,
that
but
discussion.
those are two. I mean, achievement, and if you're performing at achievement. Oh, I don't know. An achievement test is different than the other test, which is whether, you know, you'll do well in college, and that's measuring two different things. And I think that's why I was so surprised, and so was the rest of the people in this state when, you know, we changed over from the ACT to the SAT, and you know.
So I am getting some information.
Okay.
Yes, the SAT has been redesigned. Oh, and here is the information. I'm getting it in two different ways. But Ms. Zarkowski, do you want to come up and address that?
You may have already addressed it.
Please, would you tell us more?
Just start fresh, because I probably didn't do it justice.
And I just ran downstairs from the 5th floor, so. Hi. So the College Board has redesigned the SAT. So there is no longer some of those, what some of us went through, those trickier kinds of questions and those kind of idiosyncratic, wow, you can tell that that's an SAT thing. So that it is much more reflective of what it is that we expect our students to be able to do in terms of reading, English, and math. They've eliminated this word is like this word as this word is to this word.
Analogies.
And some of the, again, those vocabulary words that most of us only saw on the SAT test. And the vocabulary is much more based in what students are exposed to, both in terms of fiction reading and nonfiction reading. There's a lot of similarities actually between what they refer to as the evidence-based reading and writing test to our English language arts test. So again, there's been this shift from what I would refer to as an ability test to an actual achievement test.
I see.
But the colleges are using that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry you had to run.
Any time for any of you.
Okay, so that was a preview of the conversations we want to start having with you in October, potentially November. But wanted to also put out a reminder that there are other areas we'll be talking about as well, which have to do with what goes into the calculations on the framework. And so that first one is growth to standard. State statute requires that we have a measure of student academic growth to standard based on students' progress towards meeting the state standards. We have an opportunity now that we are through assessment shifts, so we can go back and reevaluate the methodology for that and create a new measure. So we'll be doing that this fall, getting stakeholder feedback, and then also talking with you about that. So that's another area we'll be focusing on and talking through what goes into the frameworks. We also, like I mentioned previously, will be going through rulemaking for HB 181355, and so we'll be gathering feedback for that this fall, coming back to you in the spring, in the winter and the spring, to have those conversations as well. And there are some, with that one, we're taking kind of the detail that was in statute and putting it in board rules. So there'll be conversations around calculations there as well. So we're hoping to cover all of those things over the next few months.
So how will you get feedback? I mean, for example, is it time for us to consider putting greater weight on achievement than we have up to now? Changing that relationship, since ultimately that's where we want to go. We want to see growth and we want to measure growth, but achievement has to matter, and it doesn't matter as much at the elementary level. Is that something you're going to be looking at? Do we want to get more criterion reference rather than the normed?
And we can look at that specifically, since that is something we've heard from the board, obviously. I think Growth to Standard also speaks to that, because it is kind of a bridge between growth and achievement, since it will be growth that's tied to standards.
Right.
So we can talk about how that all plays together to have more of a focus on achievement potentially on frameworks.
Okay. Board Member Flores.
But if we're talking about achievement, there are other tests for elementary school that are more conducive, I think, to achievement, such as the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. And I know we have this one that kind of works up. But if we had, let's say, the Iowa test that could, I mean, it does have a first grade, a second grade, a third grade, a fourth grade, and such, that there's more gradations. And I know that they might have something for writing, which I think the Iowa Test of Basic Skills may not have, but we could have something else for writing, but it would be more tempered and more aligned with achievement, than what we have. And certainly it would give we would have a test for every grade level, that first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, instead of, that wider, what is it, third grade, and then what is the next grade that we test? Third, fourth, fifth.
We do every grade after.
And then we could have, more information about first grade through third grade that could help teachers.
So Board Member Flores, I appreciate that comment, and we can talk about the assessment system. That's a whole other conversation. I think a lot of districts use their own types of assessments, sort of in first through third, and so we'll just have to, there's lots of complications there with the whole state assessment system and the trajectory and the long-term, trend analysis and all that. So we can discuss that at another
But
session.
here we're talking about here we're going to have this year-long study on remediation, which is basically on the what is it? The act, the Reading Act that we have. The READ Act, and we have all that. And wouldn't it be, if we're going to, some people are questioning the READ Act. I'm not questioning it. I think it's important that we give a lot of effort. We put a lot of effort in those early grades for kids to read. And now I'm kind of going against my own kind of sensibility about testing, but it would help to know how they're doing in first, second, and third, for the state to know. I know individually schools are doing it, but for the state to to get more of a grounding on, you know, what we're doing and what's not going right, would also help teachers, you know, to know, especially, and make it more forceful for other districts who are not providing a year-end assessment for first grade, second grade, and those very early years that are so important, and that we can also have and would give more meaning to the READ Act.
Board Member Shuffle?
I was just going to go back to the whole balance between growth and achievement, and I think by shifting the emphasis to achievement targets, in a way we ask districts and schools to focus on accelerated growth. So not just growth, but accelerating growth, catch-up growth. And I think that's really beneficial to the students.
Thank you. Board Member Rankin?
Tell me if I'm incorrect on this, Ms. Pearson, you might remember this. Didn't we just flip this 60% academic, 40% growth, flip it to 40% academic like 3 years ago?
So in 2015,
Yep.
Right, it was June of 2015, you guys voted on this. Because we were switching to new assessments, we didn't have that growth to standard or that adequate growth measure anymore. So we had a conversation about how to adjust the percentages in the framework without having that adequate growth or the growth to standard, because that's a little bit more tied to achievement than pure growth is. So at that time, I think we had been 75% growth, 25% achievement at the elementary and middle school levels. And so moving the adequate growth out of growth, or not having it for those few years, you drop the growth down to 60% from 75 and moved achievement from 25% up to 40% to adjust. So I think there's a lot of good conversations for you all to have over the next few months about, with adequate growth or growth to standard coming back in, where does that fit, and then where do you put that in the weighting? So I think we felt that drop, or that change from 75% to 60% was pretty comparable by removing the adequate growth component to what it had been previously. But this is something that you all have discretion over. It's not in statute about what the weightings are. It's actually in board rule that says, right now the board rule says growth and post-secondary workforce readiness need to be weighed the most. So that's something, when you do the rulemaking process with HB 181355, that may be something that you all want to discuss.
Thank you.
Board Member Durham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you know, I have been on record as being opposed to using cut scores, that I always have preferred to use you know, the 90th percentile, you know, showing that you did better than 90% of the kids who took the test, or 50th percentile, or whatever. And because of the conclusions of and or pressure from, I think, the business community in large measure, we've decided that even that our education system is inadequate compared to other modern industrialized countries. So we've tried to use this cut score on students, and trying to measure whether they were capable of competing in a modern industrial world. But then we have been reluctant to apply that same standard to those who deliver the education. And I think that's what's led to the disconnect. And I think we really need to have we really need to use one or the other. We need to, I would prefer personally to go to the percentile score and have the debate and discussion about how adequate or inadequate we are as a country in dealing, or in competing in a modern industrial worldwide economy, and have that debate somewhat separate from the score setting. But if we are going to use cut scores, then it can only make sense to apply those not only to the students, but to those who deliver the education product as well. And I think there are some real dangers in that don't have anything to do with informing parents about how well their kids are doing, but there are other kinds of dangers that this board should discuss in doing that. That it's now, I think it's now clear to me, that's the problem, is we just have two different standards.
Board Member Flores?
I probably would not disagree with you, but I also think that when a district is spending $10 on textbooks per year. And not, many don't know what a good curricula is for their students. And I think there's a lot of districts out there that do not provide tools for their teachers, cannot afford tools for their teachers because we are not providing the necessary monies for those tools. Then I think we're putting too much weight on the backs of teachers who do not have the tools to provide an adequate education, especially when many of our teachers are having such a hard time in really getting people into the profession. In fact, you know, the colleges are not getting the numbers of people to matriculate in their institutions. And then here we have school districts that are not able to engage, hire people that can teach. Then we have to really think about a strong curricula that is going to help these teachers who may come in already wanting. And so I really do think that we need to think about the issues of spending on tools, providing a good curricula for kids. And I know that districts, it's a right to, what is it called? Districts have the ability to have that. But we need to help them. We need to help them choose well for their students. And we need to let the legislature know that we need monies so that school districts can afford the tools so that teachers can do well in their classrooms. That's my point.
Thank you very much. Just one more question, and then I think we need to move on to the next item, and that is, to the extent that we consider some changes, whether it's the relationship between growth, et cetera, we added another measure, et cetera, can we use past data to see what would be the effect of those changes?
Yes, definitely.
Because I think there'll be to the extent that we consider making any kind of changes at this point, those folks that are on or near the clock might become quite anxious. And I think we want to know, I mean, we want to do the right thing. I'm not suggesting that would keep us from doing it, but I think we want to know how that's going to affect everybody, or they were going to want to know how that's going to affect them.
Yep.
So,
Definitely.
did you have another comment?
I was just going to make a quick comment.
Go.
This would be helpful because I think people use the data as both descriptive and aspirational. So here's what is, how can we use it to make changes? And so it'd be interesting to know how people use the data, because that links back to how we, what categories we use and how we make it accessible to people that can use it.
Okay. So, Board Member Rankin.
Miss Ashley, I had a discussion yesterday with Mr. Dillon, and I don't know if it was passed over to you, but I'd like to bring it up right now. And I think some of the stakeholders and the parents have difficulty going through all this information and understanding what's going on. So my question was this: how many third graders did we have take this test last year?
I don't know that offhand.
I have that information. So last year we had.
Can you use your mic?
Oh, sorry.
I can talk really loud too. Okay, you're going to hear my voice. So last year we had 63,016 third graders that actually took the assessment, and that was 97. The participation rate of our third graders was 97.2%.
Okay, so we have a really good cross-section of students that took this test at third grade, and we have the READ Act, and third grade is supposed to be the time that all students are reading.
Correct.
So what is the percentage of the students, of these 97% that took the test, that are reading at grade level?
So for 2018, the students that met or exceeded expectations was 40.4%.
Say that again, please.
40.4%.
Okay, thank you. 40% are on grade level. Okay.
Well, they're reading to learn. They're at a level where they're reading to learn. So
Are we ready to go on, guys?
Please.
Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. We look forward to what's going to be a challenging discussion next time.
Yeah, thank you.
And colleagues, if you have some particular items that you would like to have staff be prepared, I mean, I think we've suggested some, but could you let Ms. Bloom know, or let Ms. Rankin or me know of some specific items that you want to have the staff bring forward in this particular area? You did. Good for you. Okay. Thanks, guys. Missed? All right, I believe we are at 12:02. Multi-district online schools. Yep. So you guys will really help me if you, if you remove the water thing from the name tag, because it's not clear. Do you want to tee this off?
Sure.
Finish?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item was a request of the board to bring sort of an overview of multi-district online schools to you all. So we tried to take your feedback on what types of things you wanted to know, and we put it together in a presentation. And so I will turn this over to Mr. Cottonsteady and Ms. Martinez.
Hello.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, members of the board. It's great to see you today. And as Commissioner Anthos mentioned, the nexus for this, or the origins of this presentation, are coming from the end of the August board meeting, where a handful of questions came up. And so this is an information item to provide information in response to the questions that we heard asked during that conversation. The four primary questions that were asked, one was a request to get an overview of current multi-district online schools and their academic performance. And so we're using school performance framework information as a metric for checking in as to how our multi-districts are performing. The second question was wanting to know who are the multi-district online schools and what districts are they operating in. So we have some enrollment information for you about where our students are currently being served. There's a question about financial information and how much information we have in terms of where money is being spent in multi-district schools. And then the final question was just a general review of our application that we have for the certification of multi-district online schools. We wanted to share some thoughts with you in terms of the work that we're doing there, and then open the floor for any questions that you have or anything like that. We wanted to start just with a general review of terms of what an online school is to begin with. And so an online school in statute is a full-time school. And one of the areas to really be cognizant of there is oftentimes you'll have conversations in your community about supplemental online, which is different than when we're talking about online schools. So online schools are full-time programs. It delivers a sequential program of synchronous or asynchronous instruction directed by a teacher, primarily through online digital learning strategies. And one of the key words there is primarily through online digital learning strategies. So an online school is essentially relying on online tools and resources to provide instruction. It provides students choice over time, place, path, and modality of learning, so a level of flexibility for when those students learn. And then these are schools with an assigned school code that we can use for performance purposes. And then they also have a separate budget. So then extending beyond that, so we have online schools, but we also have multi-district online schools. So there are single district schools, multi-district schools, and then we also have single district programs. So the focus of this presentation really is on the multi-district online school, and the key differentiator there is that they operate and they serve students across multiple districts, whereas a single district school, as the name implies, is limited to students within their district, with a minor exception that they can serve up to 10 students that are outside the district. multi-district online schools can obviously serve across the state. Currently, there are 38 multi-district online schools, so we provided handouts to you in terms of those schools. So a lot of the descriptive information that you have is related to these 38 schools. So who can authorize a multi-district online school? Typically, when you think of multi-districts, you're looking at either a charter school or a district-managed school. So a school district can authorize schools. 33 of are authorized by district. Within those 33, 19 are district-run or district-managed, and 14 are charter-managed. A BOCES can also authorize a multi-district online school. Currently, we have 2 BOCES that are authorizing, managing, overseeing multi-district online schools in the state. That's the San Juan BOCES and the Education Re-envisioned BOCES, which you may know better as Colorado Digital BOCES, and they recently changed their name. And then the third is the Charter School Institute. They can authorize multi-district online schools, but at this time they do not authorize any. And then in statute, there's a reference to any group of 2 or more school districts can authorize. And so this idea of kind of a collaboration of districts, typically they would lean on a BOCES structure to do that, but in statute there is this open general statements, but currently there are no collaborations of that sort. So how are our multi-district online schools performing? On this slide, we have some summary information for you that looks at the performance of multi-district online schools for the 16, 17, and then preliminary information for the 18. Preliminary because obviously there is the request to reconsider process. And then we at the bottom we had pending the AEC framework. Those frameworks are coming out now, so we'll be able to update those data points shortly. But we weren't able to do it by the document submission deadline. So I'll reference going back on this performance. So the slide has summary information, but in your packet, we provided, I had some numbered pages for you. So pages 1, 2, 3, and 4 have some more detailed information as to the individual performance of your multi-district online schools. So that information is available for you. The slide has the summary information. We also provide you a spreadsheet, so in case you wanted to do analysis.
This is stuff that got added, which I didn't get.
We did update the spreadsheet, so we
Yeah.
sent an updated spreadsheet yesterday, but the information in the packet is pretty accurate. There are a couple of participation numbers that got updated, but they were very small changes as well. So the question of where students are enrolled, so we really looked at 3 different ways to view the information. This slide has summary information, and obviously you have to squint to look at it. But if you look at your handout, your packet, enrollment information is the bulk of that handout for pages 5 through 41. And we started first with just...
Pages are not matching.
It should look...
He's referring to some other materials in your board packet that were on board docs. I'm not seeing a lot of you having it
No.
here, but
I don't think I pulled it
so-
off.
Okay, maybe.
they should be in the binder.
It's the different numbers that you're.
Oh. It should look, not in the PowerPoint, but in this part, yeah.
I assumed they were all part of.
Sorry.
Yep, now I got it.
Okay. So in those numbered pages, you have page 5, which first provides just a listing of our multi-district online schools and their enrollment. That enrollment is based on the October 2017 October count. If you go a little further in, so on page 6, we have a ranking, a listing of where students reside. It is our understanding that was part of the question. And so the chart starting on page 6 shows the residence of the students who are enrolled in multi-district online schools. So an example is Pueblo 60. When it says 1583, it means that there are roughly 1,500 students who reside in Pueblo 60 who are attending one of the multi-district online schools. And then going a little further, if you look at page 13, We provided one other view of that information where it provides a breakdown within each of the districts for the schools that students are attending, to give you a sense of where schools are operating and the districts that they're serving.
So Pueblo City, which has one of the highest number of students in online schools, they are not in any one online school. They are in something like 19
Right.
online schools.
The students in Pueblo attend a variety of schools. Yeah.
I gotta wrap my head around all this stuff.
Okay. And then on the financial side, the question is, you know, where do we know how money is being spent? And so to provide first an overview of the funding for multi-district online schools, let me just cross-reference my notes here. So all multi-district online schools receive the same PPR. And last year that amount was $7,022.42. And so all of the multi-district online schools get that same per pupil amount. If the school is a district school, the funds are received by the district. So, you know, hypothetically, a district has a multi-district online school. That school serves 200 FTE. The district then gets funded 70/22 times the 200 FTE that they have. And then that money the district has discretion with how those funds would then be spent.
The district has discretion?
To give it to the
Well,
online?
in the same way that their school finance revenue would be received. So, you know, if they're a district with 10 high schools and elementaries, they get a FTE amount. And then there's a level of discretion and decision-making that happens at the district level for how those funds are allocated.
So they can withhold some funds from the multi-district?
Well, in
program.
these situations, so like, if we go back to the Pueblo example that was before the board earlier this year, so that was a Pueblo district managed the multi-district online school. So then they would say, okay, we're going to hire teachers, we're going to purchase some curriculum, and those purchases and those decisions could be made at a central level. And then if it's a charter school, the funds would pass through the district in the same way that charter funding typically applies. So the money would go to the charter school, but up to 5% of the revenue can be retained by the district for administrative expense purposes. And then if a school is authorized by a BOCES, the revenue is received by the district, and then there would be an agreement between the district and the BOCES for how revenue would be shared. And then once revenues are received, the district, the charter school, the BOCES, they can make educational decisions with the revenue. So here we mention, because oftentimes there is a relationship with an education service provider, they have the discretion to do that. So I provided a sample of an online expenditure report for you. So this is information that we receive at the state level. If you are a district-run multi-district online school, what level of information do we receive in terms of expenditures or information? So the district is responsible for submitting financial data back to the state that is captured in this online expenditure report. So if they make a purchase or they have an expense, they can charge it as an online expenditure, and then those expenditures can be are received by the state, and we have a report that shows a breakdown by various accounting codes for how those expenditures are being
So
made.
is a district online school part of that district's audit? Are they audited?
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting some nods in the back.
And then in your packet, like this slide obviously is really small, so I provided a sample report for you. The one that we receive is a 2-page report. The first page provides instructional program information, the second page support program, and then at the bottom it has a summary total for total online expenditures for the district. So this is just an example. Is a multi-district online school has an enrollment of 2,300 students. The district will then receive revenue from the state of 7022 times those 2,300 students. So we would say they received approximately $16 million in revenue. In the multi-district online, or on the online expenditure report, we can then see how much did they spend, and you can look at it relative to the revenue. In this example, the district reported expenditures slightly above revenues, and so that might be because they chose to put additional expenses towards their online activities beyond what they received in revenue. I will say that those numbers can vary by district, and unfortunately for this presentation we weren't able to provide a full breakdown as we're still working to go through the information.
Go ahead. Is the district authorizer the one that has to make up that difference if they spent more than what they got? And consequently, if they didn't spend as much, does the district get to keep?
Yes, so there is discretion there. I would equate it to like a high school example. You might spend more than you receive for your high school students. On the high school, you may spend less. So conceptually, the online expenditure report would provide for that level of analysis. There are currently no requirements for how that information is coded, and so you might see variability in terms of, like, one district may report a high amount, one district may report a low amount, and it's tricky because it may be that that district isn't spending as much in the online school, but it may be that they had central expenses that they didn't code as an online expenditure.
Board Member Durham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a district authorized online school where the district's passing along, what, $6,000 of the $7,400, that would be permitted, I mean, because they're allocating within the district, but
Okay.
but that school is a profit center then for them by $1,400 a student, correct?
So if I understand the
'Cause
question,
I can't imagine they're gonna have, because that's percentage-wise, what, about 12%, or 13%, they're gonna have 13% administrative expenses?
So if I understand the question right, this is a district-run, multi-district online school.
Well, it's district authorized.
And they
There's a
essentially,
contractor, I think.
Provide $6,000 or allocate $6,000 to run the multi-district online school, but they receive $7,000.
Yeah.
That seems like it would be allowable.
Yeah, so that is allowed, because
Yeah.
it's not a charter, so there's not the pass-through of everything but 5%.
Correct.
Then
So
we
if-
only have one online school that is also entitled to Title I funds, is that correct? So that's program,
There's one, I think.
Hope Online.
Hope,
Yeah, I believe that number has changed since it's no longer a pilot, and we have that information.
Right, it's no longer a pilot, but did we add other schools?
I believe so.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get more than 7,300 based on any federal funds.
Yes, there can be Title I allocation. Yeah.
Okay, and that's required, right? That's not discretionary on the part of the school district?
Yeah, the Title I
Using
funds
the
are
Title I.
supposed to follow the student.
Right.
That's where we allocated. It had that 1-year impact on some districts. I don't think it was too significant, as I recall.
So if it's a charter school, I'll go to that one. Charter school must publicly report their information, so they're to adopt a budget and post on their website current and prior years, their financial audits, salary schedule or salary policies, and their federal 990, which is essentially their nonprofit federal reporting. So there's that information, but also this is an area that we're kind of working out to see if we can't come up with more of an apples to apples type understanding, is looking at the online expenditures, because we do receive some information at the charter level, so that's an area that we just don't have prepared at this time. But we do know, at a minimum, the charter school is publicly posting this information as a state requirement. So then the question was really looking at our certification application. And, you know, the origins for that is we did review 3 schools this year. And as we went through that process, there were definitely questions that came up about, I wish this information was there, or do we collect this information? I'm having a hard time with readability. So we just wanted to provide an update for you in terms of general reflections of work that we're doing, and based on this last year of review, some possible areas that we're looking to make modifications to our application. So the first one is the applicant. We're exploring having the applicant identify their academic performance history if they have it, and if not, maybe some mechanism for, like, if they're working with an ESP, to provide a direct line of information as to that academic performance history, and how the district sees the multi-district will support them with their academic performance and improvement efforts. Some of that information is already there, but we're looking at maybe these are going to be asked in a different area or a way that it can be presented so that the formatting when it comes to the board is a little more direct, and you can say, okay, here's where that information is and I can reference it. Applicant to identify plan for how online school meet graduation guidelines, so we know that one came up, and so we were exploring maybe just asking more clearly and have them speak to how their plan aligns. At update student data privacy section, so there are elements in the application that are currently asking about privacy and controls that they have. But we're just wanting to reference those questions and make sure that they're current with the recent standards that have been established. And then another area that came up, an example was an application came forward with a charter school that said this was going to be a charter school, and we had incomplete information as to whether that charter had already been authorized by the district and the status. And so there are times where the applicant is representing certain designations, and so we want to create checklists that show what stage in the process those schools are at. We don't have a hard and fast rule that they necessarily have to be designated as a charter school or as a P-TECH at the time that they apply to us, but we want to at least provide a nice summary page for the board so that you're aware of where they are in that process. And then, you know, kind of high level formatting changes. We talked about, you know, schools can do a rewrite or they can respond to questions that come in the first rubric review. So just looking at ways that we can format that information so that you have, like if it's change information, that you're just seeing the changes and not two applications necessarily. And then we're open to other suggestions that you have. So I don't know if you.
Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed so the largest of these charters, which is goal, is performance, which is the highest category.
I believe goal is AEC performance, so there's a slight variation,
So
but
there's
they are
slight
performance as
so
an
it's AEC performance,
Yeah.
okay. So would you have the percentage of students in the districts? In other words, how many of the 18,000 plus students are in performance category, and how many are in each of the other categories would be, I think, a helpful breakdown to overall assess. Some of these are very small and may not be performing, but the number of students could be very small. So
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind getting that for us.
I don't know if I quite, in terms of information that we present, or like as a follow-up?
No, just as a follow-up, just I think
Okay.
if we come back to this issue, it would
Okay.
be helpful to know. It's not critical otherwise.
Great.
Board Member Sheffield.
I was just going to ask if the department reviews the contracts, the management contracts between the EMO and the district.
So we
That's
do
something-
receive a copy with the application, and we do, that's part of the review process.
Okay. Is there a rubric for that, or just it's
Yes.
based on certain criteria?
It's on the, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But are there areas that you'd like us to focus on in particular? Or?
Yeah, possibly. I need to look into that a little further.
Okay.
But it's good to know that you do see them. So the question is, how do you review them? Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for myself, we will get the information about how well is the district doing, where is it on the framework, and then how well has the intended provider performed up till now? Is it brand new, or has it been in business for X number of years? And what's been the student achievement, which might be Colorado student achievement, or it might be out of state. Is that correct? Is that what we asked for?
Sorry, that's correct. Yes, and we currently do ask for ESP evidence of past performance. Just wondering if we look at that a little bit deeper in the type of information we're requiring. Sometimes we get information that may not actually speak to the actual academic performance, and our rubric is such that it's like, did you provide this information? Yes, no. So just taking a look at that and making sure we're tighter around that.
Right. Of course, we want to know how many kids have successfully completed whatever the program is. What, i.e., what is the dropout rate? It's generally pretty high, I believe, in online programs.
And completion.
Yeah. Completion, achievement data. And depending on the level, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, what are the assessments that are actually used to do that measure? Please. Any other things, colleagues? Board Member Goff?
Well, yes, and I don't know how really pertinent it is right now, but the assessment situation, our state assessments, is it a one-day only proposition for these kids? Since they're in an online program, are there physical testing centers? Are there arrangements made for them to go take the assessments on a given day? Is there any leeway at all? Of course, part of the assessment is now online, so I guess.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it just varies by school. So schools that may have a physical location associated with them, that's probably not an issue. But for the fully virtual schools, they definitely do travel throughout the state. And usually the month of April is when they may set up different testing sites in different areas. So I know that is a possibility. But it is typically, like if you're in the Western Slope region, that particular online school may be there for the first week of April, and if that family is, it may provide some difficulty. But I think that's similar to like a brick and mortar school. They may have a certain week that they're testing, and but they obviously have the opportunity for makeups in those settings. But so I guess to answer your question, that it is, there is just a specific time, but these schools do make efforts to get out there and test all their students, especially if they're fully virtual.
I don't know. It's hard not to think about the connection between that necessity to arrange and participation rates.
Sure, absolutely.
I'll think about that some more. I can't solve it right this second, but I think it's worth considering. And if that ties into dropout rates and down the road impacts for these kids, it's important.
Board Member Sheffield.
I guess my previous question related to how much does a district benefit from an online school? And I guess that would be in the contract, right? And so the difference between PPR and what's paid to the management company, what the district has and what's paid to the management, right? That difference, I mean, is there an incentive for the district to have these schools? Right, so I'm just saying, is that pretty consistent, or is it all over the map, or?
I mean, I think it just depends what the district's goals are. Some districts open up schools to make sure that their students are having more opportunities, but realizing
that's where we want it to sit.
Yeah, realizing
really keep the kids the center of the discussion.
Sure, they are contracting with an outside provider. The contracts usually do outline, what percentages a district would be keeping, and sometimes there's explanation as to for what reasons. Like there was recently a situation where a certain amount was to be allocated or to be kept by the district to hire a person to help, with administrative duties of overseeing online schools. So sometimes we get detailed information like that. Sometimes we just get the percentage of what the school might or the district may retain in those agreements.
So is it an indirect issue that, a district might benefit from those schools, but that
the bulk of the difference doesn't go to the students, it goes to the district? And so, I mean, is there any guidelines around that to ensure that students are kept the center of the discussion instead of kind of a profit or benefit motive for the district? Or?
Yeah, and I unfortunately don't know the answer
Board
to
Member
that.
Sheffel, I think that's sort of what's been in our minds, is to get that
Think
sense.
about
I
that.
don't know that we've articulated
Right.
specifically the question that we wanted to ask of online schools to or
I mean-
district authorizers to report, but maybe that's the direction we should be going in.
I mean, we want it to be a win-win for the district, for the
Uh-huh.
online school, for the students. Question, is there a way to think about how that could be?
We could at least in the application make sure that that's called out in terms of sort of, how the money flows. And then, if you guys have ideas on sort of criteria you want us to apply to that, or you could have the discussion when we bring it forward to you. But I think that's not something we make a judgment on right now. We just might see it.
For example, if we see that the students that are enrolled are successful, it may not matter to us how much of the money is going forward. But if we see the opposite, if we see that kids are not thriving, are not learning, and we also see there's money being held back, we could sure ask the question, don't these students need more resources? So I still haven't figured it out. More teachers, more support somehow in order to get to be better. Board Member McClellan.
Yeah, along those lines, I wanted to know, you mentioned that they have requirements for financial transparency similar to that of a brick and mortar school. Are we providing oversight to make sure they are accurately and timely reporting that as required by law? And if they hire a management firm, does that then create an area of obfuscation where we then don't know what the salaries are and don't know how much went to
That's private.
Yeah, so my understanding is that with the expenditures, the expenditures are essentially happening on the district accounting system.
Mhm.
And
So
so
they're
then someone is coding it as an online expenditure. So when the financial data is transmitted to the state, that would include anything that they're representing as online expenditures. But if a district chooses to work with an ESP and theoretically has $1 million expenditure, we would see one expenditure for $1 million and not necessarily see how those $1 million are being spent.
So we could have a case where the per pupil funding basically goes into a cloud and we can't see how much is going to salary and how much is going to directly benefit those kids.
Potentially.
That's a concern. Thanks.
Please.
Yeah. Jennifer Oakes, and I just wanted to come up and clarify. We have provided guidance to districts and to schools that for that provider that we would not accept just one line, that we would require that maybe there's a one payment, but we do require them to break it out in more detail. We just say it's not enough to give us that $1 million line, that it's a contract fee. We do need to break it out to salaries and other types of line items. We don't go into much more detail than that, other than that single number is not sufficient for online reporting.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Board Member Durham.
Just, I think for perspective, the number of students in these online schools is about something less than 2% of the total students in the state. Is that close? 960,000 students, is that about right? And 18,000?
223.
Yeah, it's roughly about 2% of the
About
total.
2%, yeah, I had a 1.91 or something. But, so it's not a, at this point, it's still a, shall we say, almost an experimental area, or maybe that's the wrong term, but it's something that may grow at some point, may grow significantly as technology improves and that sort of thing. But right now, it's it's not eating up, and at only $7,000 a pupil versus the average of about 12,000 that's being spent all in for pupils. So they're roughly about 60% of the cost of a regular, of a student in a non-online school. So I think we need to keep all of those things in mind, that they're getting, first of all, only 60% of the funding. So if expenditure per pupil makes a difference, it would be hard to expect these students to perform as well. I don't personally happen to believe expenditure per pupil dictates outcome, but just I think we need to frame this discussion with some percentage, with some perspective.
Sorry, Board Member Lars.
Yes, you know, I thought about it at first in the way you were saying, well, what percentage is that? And then I thought, well, but it is a significant number of students, and we want those students to do well, whether they're in a brick or mortar school or in an online school. So I'm glad we're having this discussion, and I'm glad you're bringing these figures before us. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you. We now know a little bit more. We'll see when the next one comes forward, whether whether the requests we've made have been sufficient for us to feel like we can make a decision.
Okay, great. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure there's mechanisms for you to have those come to us, and we'd be happy to look into.
So
them
there
for
were
you.
a couple of them, right? There were a couple
Yeah.
of questions for follow-up? Okay.
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is lunch. Do we need to go into executive session? Yep. So, let's call us into exec session, then you can go.
Pardon me?